I haven't spoken to my sister-in-law since she cheated on my brother. And everyone thinks I'm overreacting. I've always been close with my brother. He's 2 years older than me, and even as adults, we've stayed in touch almost every day. When we were kids, he was protective, but not in that annoying older brother way. He just genuinely looked out for me. I always admired how he handled life, patient, humble, and the kind of guy who would pull over to help strangers change a tire. So when he met Hannah, I was honestly thrilled for him. She was charming, funny, and made him light up in ways I hadn't seen in years. The first time I met her at a family barbecue, she brought homemade brownies and laughed at my dad's corny jokes, which was an instant win. I remember thinking, she's perfect for him. They dated for 3 years before getting married. It was one of those simple outdoor weddings, fairy lights, a small band and family everywhere. I gave a toast about how Hannah made my brother, Ryan, a better man, and I meant every word of it. Fast forward 4 years later, and my entire view of her has flipped upside down. It started earlier this year when Ryan began acting off. He's a quiet guy by nature, but he's always had this steady warmth about him. Then, around February, that warmth started fading. He became distracted, short-tempered, and distant during our phone calls. I thought it was stress. He's a contractor, and his company had been taking on huge projects, but something in my gut told me it was more than that. Then one night, I got a call from him. I was half asleep, and his voice was shaking. He just said, "Can I come over?" I told him, of course. When he arrived, he looked like someone had punched the air out of him. His eyes were red, and he just stood in my doorway, silent. Finally, he said, "She's been cheating on me." My stomach dropped. Apparently, Hannah had been texting someone from her gym for months, a guy named Jake, and it eventually turned into something physical. Ryan found out because she left her Apple Watch at home one day. Messages popped up while he was charging it for her. Explicit messages. I remember sitting there on my couch, speechless, watching my brother, this man who would have done anything for her, completely break. He told me he confronted her that night, and she admitted everything. She said it just happened, that she didn't mean to hurt him, that she was confused, the usual script. She begged him not to tell anyone, especially our family. Because she didn't want to be judged, he left the house and came straight to me. For weeks he stayed in my guest room. Barely talking, I tried to respect his space, making him meals, giving him quiet, trying to remind him he wasn't alone. Hannah texted me a few times, asking to talk. I ignored her. Then she called crying, saying, "Please, don't hate me, it wasn't what it looked like." I hung up. Because what else was I supposed to do? She eventually showed up at my place. I remember opening the door and seeing her there, eyes swollen from crying. Holding some stupid box of muffins like that was going to fix anything. She started talking before I could even say a word. How sorry she was. How she didn't know why she did it. How she still loved Ryan. I told her to stop. I said, "You don't get to say that. You don't love someone and destroy them at the same time." She stood there crying, and for a moment I almost felt bad. But then I remembered Ryan sitting on my couch that night, shaking and quiet, staring at the floor like his life had collapsed, and I couldn't do it. I told her to leave and that I didn't want to see her again. That was 3 months ago. Since then, Ryan's moved back into his place. They're separated but not divorced yet. He's still struggling. Therapy, long walks, late-night calls where he says things like, "I don't know how I didn't see it coming." It breaks my heart every time. The problem now is that the rest of my family thinks I'm being too harsh. My mom says, "Sweetheart, I know what she did was wrong. But people make mistakes. Don't carry hate. It'll eat at you." My dad tries to stay neutral. But even he said, "You've made your point. You don't have to punish her forever." But the one that really got me was when my cousin Megan told me I was ruining family peace. Apparently, Hannah's been trying to make amends, sending flowers to my parents, calling to apologize, even writing Ryan's mom a letter, and they've started softening toward her. They keep saying, "She's trying, she's remorseful." But here's the thing. She didn't cheat on them, she cheated on my brother, the one person who's never hurt a soul in his life. And no matter how many muffins she bakes or letters she writes, she can't undo what she did. Last weekend, things came to a head. It was my nephew's birthday. Ryan and Hannah don't have kids, but our younger brother Ethan does. And he threw a party at his house. I went, Ryan went, and when we got there, Hannah was there too. No one told me she'd be there, not even Ryan. He said later he didn't know either. When I saw her, I froze. She smiled nervously. waved a little, and said, "Hi," like we were old friends or something. I didn't say a word. I just turned and walked out onto the porch. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. Ryan followed me a few minutes later. Clearly embarrassed, he said, "She shouldn't have come." I swear I didn't know. I believed him. But I also saw how uncomfortable he looked, like he was being pulled in two directions. I told him, "You don't owe her grace. You owe yourself peace." After that, my phone blew up with family messages. My mom said I made a scene. My aunt texted that we're adults. We should all get along. Even Hannah texted me later, saying she wished I could move forward. I left her on read. I love my family. But I'm not going to play pretend just to make everyone else comfortable. Forgiveness doesn't mean ignoring what happened. And right now, I don't have forgiveness in me. Maybe one day I will. Maybe when I know my brother is really okay, when he's moved on, and when the thought of her doesn't make my stomach twist. But not now, not yet, because when I look at her, all I see is the person who took the light out of my brother's eyes. And I'm not ready to pretend that's okay. Update: it's been about 6 weeks since I posted, and I honestly didn't expect things to explode the way they did. What started as a simple boundary, me not wanting to talk to my brother's cheating wife, somehow turned into a full-blown family Cold War. The day after my last post, I went over to my parents' house for dinner. I hadn't seen them much since the birthday party fiasco because I was avoiding another confrontation. My mom had insisted, "Let's just have a quiet meal. No drama." So I went, hoping maybe things would calm down. The second I walked in, though, I knew something was off. My dad looked tense, and my mom had that "we need to talk" face. I sat down at the table, and my mom sighed like she was carrying the weight of the world. She said, "Honey, we invited Hannah to dinner next week. We thought it might be a good time for the family to heal." I stared at her. "You what?" She tried to keep her voice soft. She reached out again, and I think she genuinely wants to make amends. "Your father and I think it's time to move forward. Ryan's even agreed to be there." That hit like a punch to the chest. "Ryan's going?" I asked. Dad nodded, avoiding eye contact. He said he's tired of the tension. He doesn't want everyone walking on eggshells anymore. I could feel my blood boiling. So she cheats on him? And now he's the one trying to fix everyone's feelings about it? They both went quiet. My mom looked at me like I was being unreasonable. "People make mistakes, sweetheart. You can't hold on to hate forever." I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, "You're asking me to sit at the same table as the woman who destroyed my brother. No, I'm not doing it." Then I left. Later that night, Ryan called. He was calm, almost too calm, which made it worse. He said, "Look, I know you're angry, and I get it. But I need you to trust me on this. I just want peace," I said. "Peace with her? After what she did?" He sighed. "Peace for me. Not with her, necessarily, but for me. I can't keep living with everyone taking sides." I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. It wasn't weakness. It was someone trying to breathe after being underwater for too long. He told me he wasn't reconciling with Hannah, just hearing her out. He said she'd been going to therapy, that she'd written him a long letter owning up to everything. He didn't tell me what it said, but I could tell it shook him. Part of me wanted to respect that, but another part, the protective little sister part, hated it. I wanted to burn every bridge she tried to build, because I'd seen what she'd done to him. The following week, they had that dinner. I didn't go. My mom told me afterward that it was actually nice, which made me want to throw my phone across the room. Apparently, Hannah cried a lot. She apologized to everyone. My dad said she seemed sincere. Ryan sat quietly most of the time, didn't lash out, just listened. When my mom told me that, I asked, did she apologize to him? Or just to the family for being inconvenient? My mom didn't have an answer. A few days later, I got a text from Hannah. It was long. Paragraphs of her explaining how sorry she was, how she understood why I hated her, and how she hoped someday I'd find forgiveness. She wrote, "You've always been like family to me, and I know I betrayed that. I don't expect forgiveness, but I do want you to know that I'm trying to become a better person." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Every time I think about replying, I imagine Ryan sitting on my couch, crying quietly into his hands that night, and my fingers freeze. Then about 2 weeks ago, something unexpected happened. Ryan started dating someone new. Her name's Lila, and she works in marketing. They met through a friend of his. I only found out because he mentioned her casually over lunch like it wasn't a big deal. I was shocked. I asked, "Are you ready for that?" He smiled, a small, tired smile. "I don't know, but she makes me laugh again. That's got to count for something." And that's when I realized my anger toward Hannah had become my way of protecting him. But maybe I was holding on to it harder than he was. He wasn't forgetting, but he was moving forward in his own way. That hit me hard. I'm not ready to forgive Hannah. I don't think I ever will. Not in the way my mom wants me to. But I did finally respond to her text. I said, "I'm glad you're trying to be better, but forgiveness isn't something you earn with words. It's something time and actions have to prove." That was it. Short, polite, honest. She didn't reply. And I don't need her to. Since then, Ryan and I have gotten closer again. We talk more, laugh more. And he even mentioned maybe joining a hiking club with Lila. He seems lighter, and seeing him healing, genuinely, has started to loosen the tightness in my chest. I'm not there yet. I still don't want Hannah around. But I'm starting to realize that holding on to anger doesn't protect the people you love. It just keeps you stuck in their pain. Ryan doesn't need me to fight for him anymore. He just needs me to be there when he stands up on his own. And that's exactly what I'll do. Final update. It's been nearly 6 months since all of that chaos. And honestly, I didn't think I'd ever be writing another update. But a lot has changed. Some for the better, some just. Different. Ryan and Lila are still together. What started as a maybe turned into something serious. Something that honestly makes my heart feel calm when I see them together. Lila isn't like Hannah. She's quieter, more grounded. The kind of person who listens more than she talks. You can tell she's steady. She doesn't try to fix Ryan or pity him. She just shows up. I'll never forget the first time I met her. Ryan invited me over for dinner at his place. And I was nervous because it was the first time in years I'd seen him genuinely want someone to be there. Lila cooked homemade lasagna, garlic bread, and the kind of salad you actually want to eat. When I arrived, she greeted me with this warm, easy smile and said, "You must be the sister he never shuts up about." That line alone disarmed me. I liked her instantly. She wasn't trying to win points. She was just being real. Throughout dinner, Ryan looked happy in a way I hadn't seen since before everything went wrong with Hannah. Not manic happy, not trying too hard happy, just content. He laughed, joked, reached for Lila's hand without thinking about it. It made me realize something. Happiness doesn't always look like fireworks. Sometimes it's just peace, after dinner. When Lila stepped out to grab dessert, I asked him quietly, "You good?" He smiled, eyes soft. "Yeah, I think I finally am," and I believed him. That night, driving home, I thought about how far we'd come. I went from being so full of anger toward Hannah that I could barely say her name, to sitting in my car, realizing that her chapter in our story was truly over. Not erased, but over about a month later. Hannah reached out again. This time, it wasn't a long emotional text. It was short, she wrote. "I wanted to let you know I'm moving to Seattle. I think it's time for a real fresh start. Thank you for being honest before. I deserved it." I stared at that message for a long time. It didn't make me mad. It didn't make me sad either. It just felt final. Like we were all closing a door that had been open for too long. I didn't reply, and I didn't need to. Ryan told me he'd seen her once more before she left. They met for coffee, not for reconciliation. Just closure. He said she apologized again, for everything, and he told her he forgave her. But that forgiveness didn't mean he wanted her back. He just wanted both of them to move on with lighter hearts. That's something I never thought he'd be capable of saying. Not because he's cold, but because I thought she'd broken something permanent in him. Turns out she hadn't. He rebuilt it himself. He and Lila recently took a weekend trip to Asheville, and he sent me pictures of them hiking, smiling, looking alive again. I didn't realize how much I'd been holding my breath for him until that moment. As for the rest of the family, things have slowly gone back to normal. My mom still talks to Hannah occasionally, mostly polite check-ins, but she finally understands that I don't have to do the same. My dad and I are closer now, weirdly enough. He told me one night that he admired how fiercely I protected my brother. He said, "You were his shield when he couldn't hold one up." That matters. That meant everything to me. If you'd asked me months ago, I would have told you I could never let go of the anger. That forgiveness was just letting someone off the hook. But now I see it differently. Forgiveness isn't for the other person. It's for you. It's what lets you stop living in that moment of hurt. I don't forgive Hannah in the sense that I want her in my life. But I do wish her peace. Because wishing her misery keeps me tied to something that's long gone. And more importantly, Ryan's happy. Truly happy. He's back to cracking dumb jokes, going fishing with our dad, and teasing me about my terrible cooking. Last week, He told me he's thinking about proposing to Lila someday. He said it quietly, almost shyly, but with that kind of glow in his eyes that you can't fake. He said, "I know it's early, but it feels right. I don't want to be afraid to try again." I hugged him so tight I thought I might break his ribs, and in that moment every ounce of anger, resentment, and bitterness I had left, it just dissolved, because love isn't about perfection or punishment. It's about endurance and seeing my brother, after all the heartbreak and pain, standing on the other side of it with hope again. That's everything I ever wanted. So no, I don't talk to Hannah. I don't need to. But I'm not fuming anymore. I'm free, and I think, finally Ryan is too. Stories number 2. I took my girlfriend to my dad's birthday, and she messed up everything. I've been dating Lauren for just over 9 months. She's smart, funny, and honestly the kind of woman I never thought I'd be lucky enough to date. I'm 29, she's 27, and things had been going smoothly. We'd hit that comfortable rhythm where you start imagining meeting each other's families more often, maybe even talking about a future together. So when my dad's 60th birthday rolled around, I thought it was the perfect time to bring her to a family event and really integrate her with everyone. Big mistake. My dad, Mark, is the kind of guy who loves a good family gathering. Backyard barbecue, music, laughter, the works. My mom, Ellen, had spent 2 weeks planning everything, including getting this massive banner that said, "Cheers to 60 years," and ordering his favorite cake from this bakery in town he's obsessed with. Everyone was hyped for it. My brother Eric and his wife Dana were flying in from Texas. My cousins, even my grandparents. It wasn't some fancy event, just a big family cookout. But it meant a lot to my parents. Lauren seemed excited when I told her about it. She even said, "I can't wait to make a good impression." But she started nitpicking from the second we got there. When we arrived, my mom greeted her with her usual warm, Midwestern energy, hugs, smiles, that mom thing where she immediately offers food. But Lauren barely smiled and kind of grimaced when my mom hugged her. I brushed it off, assuming she was just nervous. The first awkward moment happened not even 20 minutes in. My Uncle Dave handed Lauren a beer and said, "Welcome to the family." She laughed awkwardly and said, "Oh, I don't drink cheap beer," then handed it back. The whole group just kind of went quiet for a second. Dave laughed it off, but I could see he was taken aback. My mom gave me this side eye that said, "Really? This is the girl?" I tried to play it cool and pulled Lauren aside. I whispered, "Hey, maybe just loosen up a little, okay? Everyone's just trying to be friendly." She rolled her eyes and said, "Sorry, I just didn't expect everyone to be so loud." Strike 2 came during dinner. My mom had made her famous potato salad, something that's practically a family institution. Everyone always raves about it. Lauren took one bite, made a face, and said loud enough for people to hear, "Oh wow, this is interesting. Is it supposed to taste sweet?" My mom froze mid-conversation. Eric looked at me across the table with that dude. Control your girl look. I wanted to disappear. To make matters worse, Lauren then tried to help my dad by taking over the music. He's a huge fan of classic rock, Tom Petty, the Eagles, Bruce Springsteen, the kind of stuff that's been the soundtrack of every family gathering we've ever had. Lauren connected her phone to the speaker and said, "Let's play something with better energy," before switching to a hyper-pop playlist. My dad was polite, but clearly annoyed. You could almost feel the vibe of the whole party dip. At this point, I was mortified. My mom whispered to me, "Maybe she's just overwhelmed." But I could tell she was trying hard to stay diplomatic. The final straw, though, was the cake. My mom had spent a ridiculous amount on this triple-layer chocolate fudge cake, Dad's favorite. When it was time to cut it, everyone gathered around, singing "Happy Birthday." Lauren suddenly blurted out, "Wait, don't cut it yet," and ran to her bag. She came back with a store-bought box of vegan cupcakes and said, "I brought something healthier since we all need to think about cholesterol at this age." The silence after that could have been cut with a knife. My dad laughed, thank God, but it was that tight. "Awkward laugh you do when you're trying not to make a scene," he said. "Well, thanks, Lauren, but I think I'll stick with my chocolate cake today." My grandma actually snorted. Lauren shrugged and said, "Suit yourself," then ate one of her cupcakes while everyone else dug into the cake. After everyone left, my mom pulled me aside in the kitchen. She didn't raise her voice, but she said, "She's interesting," which, from my mom, is code for "I can't believe she did that." My dad just chuckled and said, "You've got your hands full, son." On the drive home, I tried to gently tell Lauren that some of her comments had rubbed people the wrong way. She got defensive immediately. I was just being honest. "It's not my fault your family can't handle it," she said. Then she accused me of not standing up for her. She said, "You let them make me feel like the bad guy." I just sat there staring out the window, completely drained. I'd envisioned her laughing with my family, maybe helping my mom in the kitchen, maybe even becoming part of that world. Instead, I felt like I'd brought a tornado into a picnic. For the next few days, my mom kept texting me little check-ins. "You okay? How's Lauren?" And my brother called just to laugh and say, "Bro, that was brutal." I tried to defend her, saying she was nervous. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. Lauren doesn't get nervous. She just doesn't filter herself eventually. I sat Lauren down and told her we needed to talk. I explained that family means a lot to me, and that while I appreciated her honesty, there's a difference between being genuine and being rude. She crossed her arms and said, "So you want me to pretend?" I said, "No, I want you to be kind. We didn't fight." But there was a heavy silence after that. A week later, we decided to take a break. She said she didn't want to be with someone who cared more about appearances than truth. And I said I couldn't be with someone who thought empathy was fake. I won't lie, it hurt. But it also felt like I could breathe again. A month later, I went to visit my parents. My mom hugged me tight and said, "I'm glad you're okay." My dad grinned and handed me a beer, saying, "Don't worry, son. We all bring the wrong one home at least once." It stung a little, but he wasn't wrong. I guess the whole thing taught me something I didn't expect. Sometimes, you don't really know who someone is until you see how they treat the people who made you who you are. And once you do, it's hard to unsee it. Update. It's been about 4 months since the birthday disaster, and I figured I'd post an update, because honestly, I've had time to process a lot of what went down. And also because there's been some unexpected drama since then. After the breakup, I focused on work and spending more time with my family. It was a relief not walking on eggshells every time my phone buzzed. Lauren and I hadn't spoken since our break, which turned into a full breakup after about 2 weeks of silence. She unfollowed me on everything, and I didn't chase her. I needed the distance, but a few weeks ago, out of nowhere, she texted me. Her message said, "I just wanted to apologize for how I acted at your dad's birthday. I was nervous and I handled it badly." I sat staring at my phone for a while, trying to decide how to respond. It had been months. I wasn't angry anymore, but that night had burned itself into my brain. My mom's tight smile, my dad's polite laugh, the way my stomach dropped every time Lauren opened her mouth. Still, it felt like she was trying to make peace. So I replied, "I appreciate you saying that. It meant a lot to my family that you came, but I think we just weren't a good fit." She responded, "Yeah, maybe. But I did like your family. They just seemed judgy," and there it was. The same defensiveness, wrapped in a half apology. I decided not to reply. I'd made my peace, and I wasn't about to rehash it. Later that night, I told my mom about it. She laughed and said, "Well, at least she tried." Then she added, "Don't settle for someone who thinks kindness is a performance." That stuck with me. Since then, life's been quieter and surprisingly good. My dad's still joking about the cupcake incident, which has basically become family legend now. At my brother Eric's birthday last month, Dad even brought a box of vegan cupcakes as a joke, saying, "Thought I'd keep the tradition alive." Everyone laughed. And I laughed too. I can finally find humor in it now that the sting's gone. I've been dating a little. Nothing serious yet, but I've been way more mindful about who I bring into my circle. One thing that experience taught me is that no matter how attractive or charming someone is, if they lack empathy or humility, it's a ticking time bomb. My family might not be perfect. We're loud, we tease, we have our quirks, but we care deeply. And I want someone who can see that as a feature, not a flaw. A few weeks ago, something small but meaningful happened. My mom texted me a photo of my dad and my niece sitting in the backyard eating cake, and she wrote, "This year's cake survived unscathed." I laughed so hard I almost dropped my phone. That whole night, as embarrassing as it was, became kind of a family bonding point. Even Eric, who used to roast me about it, told me, "You dodged a lifetime of explaining her at every family event," and he's right. I've realized that sometimes the worst, most awkward moments end up clarifying things you've been too blind to see. I used to think Lauren's bluntness was refreshing, that she was just honest and didn't play social games. But what I missed was that empathy isn't a game, it's a skill, and she didn't have it. There's something else, too. A couple of weeks ago, I ran into Lauren at a local coffee shop. It wasn't dramatic or movie-like, just weirdly calm. She looked surprised but smiled, and we chatted for a minute. She told me she's seeing someone new, and I congratulated her. It was fine. But when she asked about my family, I said, "They're great. Still eating non-vegan cake." She laughed, genuinely this time, and said, "Yeah, I deserve that." And that was that. Closure in its simplest form. If there's one takeaway from this whole ordeal, it's that bringing someone into your family is like a truth serum. It shows you who they really are. Not just how they act with you, but how they treat the people who raised you, loved you, and know your history. I don't regret bringing Lauren that night, if anything. It saved me from finding out the hard way years down the line. Now when my dad brings up his infamous 60th birthday, he says, "Best one yet, it cleaned up your love life." And honestly, he's not wrong. Final update. It's been just over a year since the birthday fiasco, and I can officially say that time really does have a way of softening the edges of things. What felt humiliating and frustrating back then has turned into something I can look back on with a weird sense of gratitude. I've learned a lot about myself, about relationships, and about how important it is to see how someone fits into the life you already have. Not just the one you imagine building with them. The story of Lauren and the birthday party has become one of those family legends now. Every time there's a get-together, someone inevitably brings it up. My dad will joke, "Should we get cupcakes this time, or is that too soon?" And everyone cracks up. Even my mom, who was probably the most offended that day, laughs about it now. She'll say things like, "At least it made for good storytelling material." It took a while for me to see the humor in it, but now I can honestly laugh too, because what else can you do? It happened. It was awful, awkward, and painfully revealing. But it taught me what I needed to know. About 6 months ago, I started seeing someone new. Her name's Brooke. She's 28, and we met at a mutual friend's trivia night. What struck me about her right away wasn't just that she was kind or funny. It was that she had this way of listening when people talked. Not waiting to speak, not trying to top anyone's story, just genuinely listening. After what I went through with Lauren, that small difference felt huge. We took things slow. I didn't want to rush into anything or make the same mistake of ignoring red flags. But eventually, things got serious enough that I decided to introduce her to my family. You'd think I would have been confident this time, but nope. I was sweating bullets. My mom teased me for pacing around the kitchen before they arrived. My dad grinned and said, "Don't worry, son. We've already survived worse." Brooke fit in effortlessly. She laughed at my dad's jokes, even the corny ones, complimented my mom's cooking, and asked about everyone's hobbies without making it sound forced. She even helped clear the table without being asked, which made my mom's jaw drop in appreciation. It wasn't about trying to impress anyone. She was just being thoughtful, and that, I think, was the difference. After everyone left, my dad patted me on the shoulder and said, "Now that's how you bring someone home." It was said as a joke, but it felt like a small full-circle moment. My mom later texted me, "She's lovely. Please don't scare her off." It's been about 6 months since that dinner. And Brooke and I are doing great. She met Eric and Dana on their last visit, and the 4 of us actually went out for drinks together. Eric even texted me later, "Bro, this one's a keeper, coming from him." That's practically a marriage blessing. What's strange is that after seeing how easily Brooke meshed with everyone, I finally realized how hard it always felt with Lauren. It was like forcing 2 puzzle pieces that didn't fit. I kept trying to convince myself that the friction was normal, that maybe my family just didn't get her. But the truth is, I didn't want to admit that she just wasn't kind in the way that matters most. Funny enough, I ran into Lauren again about 2 months ago. It was at the grocery store of all places. She was polite, smiled, and we chatted briefly about work and mutual friends. She looked happy. She even joked, "Hey, no cupcakes this time." I laughed and told her it's become a running joke in my family. She rolled her eyes and said, "I guess I deserved that." And honestly, she did. But it didn't feel mean anymore. It felt finished. We parted on good terms. I don't wish her any ill will, in a strange way. I'm thankful for what happened. That night showed me what kind of partner not to bring home, and more importantly, it taught me that the way someone treats your family says everything about who they really are. This year, we celebrated my dad's 61st birthday. Same backyard, same crowd, same barbecue smell in the air. My mom made her potato salad again, and yes, it was still sweet. Just like always, when the cake came out, Dad laughed and said, "Well, it's not vegan, so I think we're safe." Brooke was sitting next to me, laughing along, and I caught my mom giving me a small, content smile across the table. That's when it hit me, a year ago. I left that same backyard feeling embarrassed and disappointed. This time I left feeling grounded, grateful, and surrounded by people who genuinely love each other. The contrast was like night and day. I guess that's life. You stumble through the uncomfortable moments, learn your lessons, and eventually find peace in the little things. I wouldn't erase that night if I could. It was messy, yes, but it led me here, and here. Here is good, really good. Stories number 3. Calling the city after my neighbor built a fence 2 feet onto my property. When I bought my house 4 years ago, I thought I had hit the jackpot. It was a quiet cul-de-sac in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio, with tree-lined streets and neighbors who waved at each other when walking their dogs. My house wasn't big, but it had a nice yard, something I'd wanted for years after living in apartments. I poured a lot of work into it, reseeding the grass, trimming the hedges, repainting the deck. It was my little piece of peace. About 6 months ago, a new neighbor moved into the house next door. His name was Rick, mid-40s, divorced, loud, and very proud of his handy skills. He moved in with his teenage son and a massive truck that took up half the street. At first, I tried to be friendly. I brought over a small basket of baked goods, introduced myself, and offered to help him with anything he needed as he settled in. He seemed polite enough, though a little distracted. He said, yeah, I'll hit you up sometime. But he never did. The first few weeks were fine. But then little things started to pile up. His dog would wander into my yard and tear up patches of grass. He parked his truck so close to my driveway that I sometimes had to pull in at an angle. Once he even used my outdoor hose without asking. I tried to let those things go. I didn't want to start neighbor drama over minor annoyances. Then came the fence. I came home from work one Friday and saw wooden posts sticking out of the ground along what I thought was the property line. I wasn't sure at first, but something about it looked off. The posts were too far in. Not much, but just enough to make me notice. I walked it out and realized it was about 2 feet into my yard. 2 feet might not sound like much, but it made my side of the yard noticeably smaller. And after the money I'd spent on landscaping, that bothered me. That weekend I went over and knocked on his door. Rick answered wearing paint-stained jeans and holding a beer. I asked casually, "Hey, I saw you're putting up a fence. Did you happen to check the property line?" He shrugged. "Yeah, the contractor measured it. It's right on the line. Don't worry about it." I didn't want to argue, but I said, "Okay, just to be sure, maybe we can compare notes. I've got my survey from when I bought the house." He smirked and said, "Tell you what, why don't you let me finish the fence first and then we can talk? I'm not moving posts for no reason." Then he closed the door. That rubbed me the wrong way. So I pulled out my home documents and found my property survey. The line was clearly marked, and the fence posts were definitely on my property. I wasn't going to let it slide. I took pictures of the posts, measurements from my fence to the property stake, and noted everything. On Monday, I called the city's zoning office and explained what happened. The woman on the phone was polite but firm. She said they'd send someone from code enforcement to take a look. 2 days later, an inspector named Mark came by with his measuring tools. I watched as he checked the boundary stakes and nodded. He turned to me and said, "You're right. That fence is about 2 feet into your property." I wasn't happy about being right. Honestly, I knew this would cause tension, but I also wasn't about to let someone claim part of my land. Mark said he'd leave a notice on Rick's door and give him 2 weeks to correct it. That night, Rick came storming over. He didn't knock. He just yelled from my front yard, "You called the city on me? Seriously?" I opened the door but didn't step outside. "Rick, I tried to talk to you first. You brushed me off." He glared at me. "You could have just come to me again instead of calling some pencil pusher from the city," I said. "You made it clear you weren't interested in hearing me out. It's my property, Rick. I'm allowed to defend it." He muttered something under his breath, then stormed off. For the next week, he made a point of slamming his truck doors early in the morning and letting his dog bark outside my bedroom window. I didn't react. A few days later, the city followed up with him. He was ordered to either move the fence or face fines. For 3 weeks, nothing happened. Then one Saturday morning, I woke up to construction noise. Rick and his son were out there digging up the fence posts. I stayed inside, drinking coffee by the window, watching them move the fence exactly where it belonged. When they were done, he stood there staring at my house for a good minute, shaking his head. Later that afternoon, I went outside to take the trash out, and he muttered, "Hope you're happy," I said. "I am. It's back where it belongs, thanks." He didn't respond. For a while it was tense. He'd avoid eye contact. His son wouldn't wave anymore, and he started parking his truck even closer to my driveway. Just close enough to annoy me, but not close enough to complain about. I decided not to escalate it further. I just focused on keeping my yard neat and staying polite when necessary. Ironically, the situation seemed to shift a few months later. One day, his dog got out and ran down the street. I saw it happen and helped him catch it. We ended up talking for the first time in months, and I think he realized I wasn't his enemy. He didn't apologize directly, but the tension eased. Now we coexist in this weird peace. We don't talk much, but we don't argue either. The fence is still there, right where it should be. Every time I mow the lawn and pass that side, I feel a small surge of satisfaction, not out of spite. But because I stood my ground without stooping to his level, it taught me something too. Being a good neighbor doesn't mean letting people walk over you. It means respecting yourself enough to set boundaries, even if they're only 2 feet wide. It's been about 10 months since the whole fence drama, and things have settled in a way I didn't expect. I thought Rick and I would stay permanently hostile neighbors, exchanging stiff nods and passive-aggressive gestures for the rest of eternity. But time does strange things, and sometimes the dust settles in ways you don't plan for. After the city made him move the fence, there was this awkward Cold War between us for months. He wouldn't speak to me, and when we both happened to be outside, he'd make a show of avoiding eye contact. His son, Tyler, who used to wave when shooting hoops in their driveway, stopped doing that too. For a while, I felt like the villain of the cul-de-sac. Then winter hit hard and everything froze, literally and figuratively. We barely saw each other. I focused on work, home projects, and life in general. But one morning in late January, during a snowstorm, I noticed Rick's truck wouldn't start. I was outside shoveling my driveway and could see him trying over and over to crank the ignition. Eventually I walked over and asked, "You need a jump?" He looked like he wanted to refuse out of pride, but he sighed and said, "Yeah, that'd help." I pulled my car around, hooked up the cables, and got his truck running. He gave me a quick nod and said, "Thanks, man," before heading off. It wasn't a grand reconciliation, but it broke the ice a little. A few weeks later, I came home to find a small box on my porch, a 6-pack of craft beer, and a note that said, "Appreciate the help. Sorry for being an ass. Rick." It made me laugh. I didn't respond directly, but the next time I saw him I gave a wave. He waved back. Since then, things have actually improved in small but meaningful ways. He doesn't let his dog roam anymore, and he started parking further from my driveway without me saying a word. In return, I make a point not to bring up anything fence-related when we talk. It's like an unspoken truce. Funny enough, I've also gotten to know his son a little. Tyler came by one weekend, asking if he could borrow my ladder because they were hanging Christmas lights. I lent it to him, and he brought it back the next day with a thank you card. That's when I realized maybe Rick's way of handling things was more about pride than actual hostility. One thing that still makes me shake my head is how many other neighbors quietly admitted they were watching the whole fence situation unfold, like it was a neighborhood soap opera. The couple across the street, the Carsons, told me they had bets going on whether I'd actually call the city. "We were rooting for you," Mrs. Carson laughed one day. Apparently, everyone had noticed how Rick could be a bit overbearing. Looking back, I don't regret how I handled things. If I'd let it go, it would have eaten at me every time I looked at that fence. I didn't call the city out of spite. I did it because he dismissed me and acted like my concerns didn't matter. If he'd just said, "Hey, let's double-check the line," it never would have gone that far. But I also realize I could have handled it a little softer. Maybe given him another chance to talk before going straight to the city. It's easy to say that now, with hindsight and less adrenaline. But in the moment, it felt like a line had been crossed, literally and metaphorically. This spring, I was out mowing the lawn and noticed him doing the same. When we got to that part of the yard where the fence sits perfectly between us, he looked over and said, half grinning, "Guess it's staying put this time, huh?" I laughed and said, "Yeah, I think the city made sure of that." It was lighthearted, and that small exchange felt like closure. We'll never be best friends, and that's fine. But we found a rhythm that works. Mutual respect, minimal drama, and a shared understanding that fences aren't just about property lines. They're about boundaries, pride, and sometimes compromise. Every time I see that fence now, I don't think about the argument anymore. I think about how it marked the start of me standing my ground, and also learning when to let things go. It's just wood and nails. But to me, it's also a reminder of growth. His and mine. It's been almost 2 years now since the fence ordeal. And life on our little cul-de-sac feels completely different. If you told me back then that Rick and I would ever be on good terms, I would have laughed. But somehow, through small moments and shared inconveniences, we've managed to become, not friends exactly, but decent neighbors who look out for each other. After that weirdly civil spring, things slowly started to thaw last summer. There was a block cookout organized by the Carsons. Everyone brought something, and I ended up sitting at a picnic table with Rick and his son for the first time since the whole mess started. It was a little awkward at first, but once people started talking about home repairs and DIY projects, Rick and I actually found some common ground. He told me about how much money he'd wasted trying to do the fence on his own, and laughed about the whole situation. "Guess I should have checked that damn survey," he said. Shaking his head, I told him I didn't hold a grudge, and I meant it. The funny thing is, since then, we've actually helped each other more than once. When a storm knocked down part of my backyard tree last fall, Rick showed up with his chainsaw before I even asked. I helped him rebuild his shed roof a few weeks later. There's still a part of me that remembers how defensive and rude he was at the start. But people grow, or maybe they just get tired of being angry. One night a few months ago, I was sitting on my deck when Rick came over with 2 beers. He sat down and said, "You know, I was real pissed at you for calling the city. Thought you were one of those uptight types. But looking back, I was the one being a jerk." I told him it wasn't about winning. I just didn't want to feel like I was being pushed around. He nodded and said, "Yeah, I get that." I didn't handle it well. Divorce had me on edge. Felt like everything was slipping out of my hands, even a damn fence. That was the first time he'd said anything that personal. It made me realize he wasn't just being arrogant. He was going through something and didn't know how to handle it. That doesn't excuse what happened, but it made it easier to understand. Sometimes, people just project their frustration onto whoever's closest. Unfortunately for me, I was that person for a while. Since that talk, things have been good. He's still rough around the edges. Loud truck, blaring country music when he's doing yard work. But now it's just background noise instead of something that grates on me. We even exchange small favors now. He plows my driveway when it snows, and I grab his mail when he's out of town. It's kind of wild how something that started with anger and legal notices turned into a surprisingly normal coexistence. The neighborhood's calmer too. A few new families moved in, and they probably have no idea that 2 years ago, this street had a mini Cold War over a 2-foot stretch of lawn. As for me, the whole thing taught me more than I expected. I used to hate confrontation. I'd go out of my way to avoid making anyone uncomfortable, even when it meant sacrificing something of mine. But standing up for myself that time changed something. It showed me that boundaries, literal and personal, are worth protecting. I don't need to justify that to anyone, but I also learned that conflict doesn't have to end in bitterness. Sometimes people just need time to cool off, and sometimes they surprise you by doing the right thing later. Rick never became my best friend, but he became a better neighbor. And in a way, I became a better one too. Now, when I look at that fence, it's not a reminder of a feud. It's just a fence, sturdy, straight, sitting exactly where it should. Every spring I plant flowers along my side of it, and sometimes I catch Rick doing the same on his. There's something oddly symbolic about that. 2 people tending to their own sides, both respecting the line in between. I guess that's how it's supposed to be. Stories number 4. They treated my house like a hotel last year, so this year I refused to host Thanksgiving. Last Thanksgiving was supposed to be special. It was the first one after my dad passed away, and everyone agreed that keeping the tradition going was important. My mom asked if I could host since I had the biggest house and a large backyard where the kids could play. I agreed because, well, family meant something to me. At least it used to. My brother Jason and his wife Nicole have 3 kids, all under the age of 10. They live about 5 hours away, so they were staying with us for 4 nights. I figured it would be hectic but manageable. What I didn't expect was for them to treat my home like some all-inclusive resort where I was the maid. The chef and the entertainment committee rolled into one. It started small. They arrived late on Wednesday night, around 11 p.m., even though I had asked them to come earlier because I had work the next day. Instead of greeting me, Jason just said, "Man, the drive sucked. You got anything to eat?" Nicole didn't even say hi. She just walked right in, dropped their luggage in the hallway and went, "Where are the kids sleeping?" I had set up the guest rooms with clean sheets, fresh towels, and even little baskets with toiletries. I thought I was being thoughtful, but within minutes, it looked like a tornado hit. The kids were running up and down the stairs, screaming, slamming doors. Jason sat on my couch, cracked open a beer from my fridge, and turned on the TV like it was his own house. The next morning, I woke up to what sounded like chaos. My kitchen was a disaster. Pancake batter splattered across the counter, cereal dumped on the floor, and sticky orange juice rings on the table. Nicole just laughed and said, "Oh, the kids were starving. You didn't have much cereal, though. Maybe next time stock up before we come." Next time, as if this was some scheduled annual stay. By Friday night, I was losing it. Every towel was dirty, every plate in the house was used, and I was doing dishes non-stop. Jason had the nerve to say, "You should get a dishwasher that's quieter. Ours back home is silent." I wanted to scream. Then came Thanksgiving dinner itself. I had planned everything. The turkey, the sides, even made pie from scratch. Mom was helping me in the kitchen when Nicole came in and said, "You know, next time maybe I can handle dessert. Yours are good but kind of heavy." Mom's face dropped. She knew how much effort I'd put in. But the final straw came on Saturday morning. I woke up to find Nicole doing laundry, in my washer, using my detergent, washing all their clothes from the trip. I thought, fine, whatever, but when I went to check the dryer, I found they'd also thrown in their bedding and towels from the guest room. And they were leaving that day. When I said something, Jason just shrugged and said, "Well, we figured we'd leave things clean for you." Except they didn't. They left wet sheets in the washer, food crusted onto the guest plates, and garbage bags piled next to the back door. After they left, I spent 2 full days cleaning, 2 days. It was like undoing a week's worth of damage from a small army, so this year, when the family group chat started buzzing about Thanksgiving plans, I decided early I wasn't hosting. Mom asked me first, gently, "You're not planning to do it again this year?" I said, "Nope, not happening." She sounded surprised. "But you did such a wonderful job last time," I laughed bitterly. "Yeah, because no one else lifted a finger." "I'm not doing that again," Jason chimed in the chat a few hours later. "What's the big deal?" "It's just a couple of days," I replied. "Yeah. And last time a couple of days turned into me being your unpaid housekeeper." Nicole texted right after, "Wow, you sound really ungrateful. We thought we were helping with family traditions. If it's too much for you, we'll just stay in a hotel next time." I couldn't help myself. I responded, "You should have stayed in a hotel last time." Cue the explosion. Jason called me dramatic. Nicole said I was creating division, and Mom asked everyone to calm down. My younger sister Becca called me privately later and said, "Honestly, I don't blame you. They were awful last year. But you know Mom's going to guilt trip you until the end of time." And she did. Mom started her campaign about how family is more important than pride and that we can't let little things ruin the holidays. I told her, "It's not pride, it's boundaries." She didn't get it. Fast forward to now. Thanksgiving is 2 weeks away, and plans are up in the air. Jason refuses to host because he says their house is too small. Nicole says hosting at a restaurant would be soulless. Mom doesn't want to host because it's too much stress, which basically means everyone's waiting for me to cave again. But I'm not. Every time someone hints that I should, I just smile and say, "I already made plans," which technically is true. I'm planning to have a peaceful Thanksgiving with just my boyfriend, Matt, and our dog. We're ordering takeout and watching movies all day. No cooking for 10 people, no cleaning up after chaos, just quiet. Becca texted me last night, "Jason's pissed you're serious about not hosting." Good. He can be mad. He can even host if he wants to prove how easy it is. For years I've bent over backward to keep family traditions alive, to make everyone comfortable, to avoid being called selfish. But last Thanksgiving made me realize something. Family doesn't mean sacrificing your peace so other people can treat you like a doormat. So this year, the table will be smaller, but it'll finally feel like home. And I'm not sorry for that update. Well, Thanksgiving came and went, and it was nothing like the chaos of last year, which, honestly, was the entire point. I wasn't planning to post an update, but a few things happened that I didn't expect, and I think it's worth sharing. When I said in my original post that I wasn't hosting, I meant it. I told everyone weeks in advance so there'd be no confusion, no last-minute guilt trips. I figured that was the mature thing to do, but of course, in my family, mature apparently translates to, "You're abandoning us." 2 days before Thanksgiving, my mom called. I could tell from her tone something was brewing. She started with her usual soft voice. "Honey, I've been thinking. Maybe you could just do a small dinner. Nothing huge, just us, Jason's family, and Becca." I laughed. Literally laughed out loud. "Mom, that's the exact same group as last year." She paused, sighed, and said, "Well, I just think the kids really associate Thanksgiving with your house now. They'll be so disappointed. There it was. The emotional blackmail. I told her calmly, Mom, I'm not doing it. I need a peaceful holiday. I've already made plans. She tried a few more guilt-loaded phrases. Family comes first. Your father would want everyone together. It's just one meal. But I didn't budge. Eventually she gave up with a disappointed, I just hope you won't regret this. Spoiler, I don't. Thanksgiving morning rolled around and it was perfect. Matt and I woke up late, made cinnamon rolls, and took our dog for a walk in the crisp air. No cleaning, no noise, no one demanding I stock up on cereal. We ordered dinner from a local place that did gourmet takeout. Turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing, the works. We even opened a bottle of wine and just sat in the quiet, talking for the first time in years. I actually enjoyed the holiday, but then, around 4 p.m., my phone started lighting up. Missed calls from Mom, texts from Becca, a couple from Jason. I ignored them at first because I knew whatever it was. It probably wasn't good. Finally, Becca texted, Please pick up. It's kind of insane here, I called her. And the second she answered, I could hear yelling in the background. Apparently, since I refused to host, they decided to have Thanksgiving at Mom's. Which might have worked fine. Except Mom's oven decided to die halfway through cooking the turkey. Smoke everywhere, alarms going off, kids crying. Jason and Nicole started bickering because Nicole wanted to order takeout, but Jason insisted they could just finish it on the grill. That, of course, ended in disaster when he burned part of it. Becca was laughing so hard when she told me, she could barely breathe. Then she said, Mom's sitting in the corner drinking wine straight from the bottle, Jason's swearing at the turkey, and Nicole's crying because the kids won't eat the mashed potatoes since they're chunky. I couldn't help it. I burst out laughing. Becca said, Honestly, it's kind of poetic justice, the universe said. You didn't appreciate last year's host? Fine, figure it out yourselves. About an hour later, Mom called. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the best of me, she said, sounding exhausted. I just wanted to say, I understand now why you didn't want to host, I smiled and said, Oh? What happened? She gave this long sigh. Your brother didn't lift a finger to help. Nicole made a mess in the kitchen, and the kids destroyed the living room. It was too much, I almost said. You don't say. But I bit my tongue. Instead, I told her gently, I love you, Mom. But this is exactly why I needed a break. There was a pause, and then she said quietly, I think I owe you an apology. I didn't realize how much work you did last year. I really took it for granted. That was the first time she'd ever admitted something like that, and I have to give her credit. It actually felt sincere. Then later that night, Jason texted me. I expected him to be snarky, but instead he wrote, All right, I get it now. Hosting sucks, I replied. It does when people treat your house like a hotel. He didn't respond for a while. Then finally said, Yeah, sorry about last year. We were kind of jerks. I was so stunned I read it twice. Jason doesn't apologize ever. But I guess burning a turkey and dealing with crying kids in someone else's cramped kitchen gave him a dose of reality. The next morning, Becca sent me photos from their Thanksgiving. The turkey looked like charcoal. The kids were eating mac and cheese from a box. And Mom was sitting on the couch with this expression that said never again. I laughed so hard I cried. That night, when Matt and I were curled up on the couch watching a movie, I realized something. I didn't just say no to hosting this year. I set a precedent. I finally showed my family that no doesn't mean I don't love them. It means I love myself enough to have boundaries. A few days later, Becca texted, Mom's already talking about next year. Guess what she said? Maybe we'll do something small. At my place this time. Progress. And honestly, I think everyone learned something valuable. Mom learned what hosting actually feels like. Jason learned that the world doesn't revolve around him. Nicole learned that sometimes you can't just dump your chaos on someone else's doorstep. As for me, I learned that peace feels a lot better than guilt. So yeah, Thanksgiving was smaller this year, but it was peaceful, warm, and real. And I'll take that over tradition any day. Final update. It's been about 5 months since that last Thanksgiving, and honestly, the ripple effects from that one decision, me refusing to host, have changed the entire family dynamic. It's funny how one small boundary can reset years of unspoken expectations. After the chaotic Thanksgiving my mom hosted, things stayed awkward for a while. Jason didn't reach out much, which I was fine with. Nicole stopped sending her passive-aggressive texts about keeping the family together. Becca and I joked that everyone went into holiday recovery mode, which honestly suited me just fine. But then February rolled around, and Mom called me again. She said, "I've been thinking, maybe we should start planning early this year so things go smoother next time." I braced myself, expecting her to ask if I'd host again. Instead, she surprised me. "I think we'll do it at my house again, but this time I'm setting rules. Rules." From my mom, I nearly dropped the phone. She said, "If they want to come, they can bring food, help clean, and keep the kids under control. Otherwise, they can stay home." I laughed, but she was serious. Apparently, she'd had such a meltdown last year after the turkey disaster that she'd sworn to herself never to be taken advantage of again. And to her credit, she stuck to it. Jason, of course, didn't take it well when he found out Mom wasn't offering to host them like royalty again. He called me, of all people, to complain. He started with, "Mom's being ridiculous. She's acting like we're kids," I said. "Well, you acted like kids last year. So she's setting boundaries. Sound familiar?" He didn't say anything for a few seconds, then sighed. "You really think I was that bad?" I laughed. "Jason, you treated my house like a hotel. You drank all my coffee, used every towel, and didn't say thank you once." He groaned. "Yeah. Okay, maybe I get it now." That was the first honest conversation we'd had in years. We actually talked for almost an hour. Not just about Thanksgiving, but about how we grew up. About how Dad's death messed with both of us more than we admitted. Jason said something that stuck with me. "I think we all clung to you hosting because it made us feel like things were still normal, but we never thought about what that cost you." It was one of those rare, clear moments where I saw my brother not as the selfish guy I'd been mad at, but as a person who was grieving and clueless about how to handle it. Since then, things have been better. He's actually been trying. He calls just to check in now, not just to ask for something. He even mailed me a birthday card, a real one, with a note inside that said, "You were right about everything." Next Thanksgiving, I'm cooking. Nicole, on the other hand, is still Nicole. She's polite but stiff whenever I see her. I think she's embarrassed more than anything, and she doesn't like being reminded that I was the one who drew the line. That's fine by me. I don't need us to be close, just civil. Becca, meanwhile, has turned into my biggest ally. She told me she used my Thanksgiving story as her boundary inspiration. She refused to babysit her friends' kids for free every weekend, and she said it felt like the most liberating no of her life. We joke that we should start a podcast called The Boundary Sisters. Then came Easter. Mom decided to host a small brunch this year. Just her. Me, Becca, and Jason's family. She made it clear that everyone had to bring something. I brought quiche and pastries, Becca handled fruit and coffee, and Jason was assigned eggs and bacon. I didn't expect him to actually follow through, but he did. He and Nicole showed up on time. With all the food cooked and ready to go, the kids were dressed neatly, polite, and, this was the real shocker, they actually cleaned up their plates afterward. At one point, Jason looked at me and said with a grin, "See, we're learning." It was such a simple moment, but it meant everything. After brunch, when everyone was lounging around the living room, Mom leaned over and whispered, "This is the calmest family holiday we've had in years." And she was right. There was no tension, no yelling, no one treating anyone else's house like a free hotel, just peace. Later that night, Jason texted me a picture of their kids helping clean up the kitchen at home. He wrote, "You started something good." That might have been the first time my brother ever gave me credit for anything. It made me realize that sometimes, standing your ground doesn't just protect your peace. It teaches everyone else how to handle theirs. I didn't have to fight or guilt anyone. I just stopped enabling the chaos, and now, we're already talking about Thanksgiving for this year, the plan. A potluck, hosted by Jason, his idea, not mine. He said he wants to see how hard it really is. I told him, "Good luck." And I meant it both sincerely and with a little bit of humor. If you told me a year ago that Jason would willingly host Thanksgiving, I would have laughed in your face. But here we are, a family that's still imperfect, still messy, but finally learning how to respect each other's time and space. And as for me, I've learned that peace doesn't just happen. You have to protect it, even from the people you love most, especially from them. I'll help Jason this year, but on my terms, I'll bring a dish, show up on time, and leave when I'm ready. No cleaning up after everyone. No playing maid, and if chaos returns, I'll happily take another year off. Because I've realized that family traditions don't mean much if they only survive at the cost of one person's sanity. So yeah, last year I said no, and it started a fire. But that fire burned away years of resentment and guilt. This year, I get to walk into Thanksgiving with no resentment, no exhaustion, just a sense of calm. And maybe that's the real tradition worth keeping. Stories number 5. I accidentally spilled tea on a girl who kept shoving past me in a crowded concert line. So, I'm not a confrontational person. I'm that person who says sorry when someone else bumps into me. I avoid drama like it's a full-time job, but apparently, even people like me have breaking points. Last month, my best friend Taylor and I went to see this indie rock band we've loved since college, Midnight Lanterns. The concert was sold out, and the line outside the venue was insane. We got there 2 hours early thinking we'd snag a decent spot. But by the time we arrived, it already wrapped around the block. It was one of those chilly evenings where everyone's bundled up, drinking coffee or tea, chatting and trying to keep warm. I had my favorite drink in hand, a large chai tea latte from this little coffee shop nearby. I was holding it carefully, standing close to Taylor, scrolling through my phone and just vibing with the crowd. Everyone was in good spirits, until she showed up. This girl, I didn't catch her name at first, appeared behind us with 2 friends. You know the type, loud, flashy, clearly drunk before the concert even started? She was wearing this sequined jacket that sparkled like a disco ball and carried herself like she owned the place. At first, I didn't mind. Concerts attract all kinds of people. But about 5 minutes later, she started trying to push her way forward through the line. Not politely either. I'm talking full-on shoulder shoving. Fake excuse me's as she bulldozed past people. Everyone around us groaned, and a few people tried to block her path. She'd just laugh and say, "My friends are up there," which was obviously a lie, because her friends were right behind her. Taylor and I exchanged a look. I muttered, "Let's just ignore her," and Taylor whispered, "She's going to start a riot." The girl kept at it, though pushing, stepping on people's feet, even spilling part of her drink on some poor guy's shoes. She didn't apologize once. I could feel my patience thinning. But I kept telling myself to stay calm. It wasn't worth it. Then she shoved me. Not a gentle bump. She literally elbowed me in the ribs trying to squeeze past. Hot chai sloshed over my hand. I turned, startled, and she looked at me like I was the one in her way. "Excuse me," she snapped, giving me this look that said move. "Peasant." Something in me just snapped. I said, as politely as I could, "Hey, there's a line. Everyone's waiting. Could you not push?" She scoffed and said, "It's a concert. Chill out. Don't be such a Karen." Then she rolled her eyes and tried to shove past again. That's when the universe, or maybe karma, stepped in. Because as she lunged forward, her elbow hit my cup, and my chai tea tilted just enough to spill, straight onto her sequin jacket. The gasp she made could have echoed through the entire block. She froze, staring down at the wet stain spreading across her sparkly top like it was the end of the world. "Oh my God!" she shrieked. "You just spilled that on me!" I blinked, feigning innocence. "Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry," I said in my best fake horrified voice. "You just bumped into me. I didn't mean to." She glared at me, furious, but she didn't have a leg to stand on. Everyone around us had seen her pushing and shoving for the last 10 minutes. A few people even chimed in. "Yeah, you were literally elbowing everyone," said one guy a few feet behind me. "She's been trying to skip the line since she got here," someone else said. The girl's face went red. Her friend stood awkwardly behind her, clearly not wanting to get involved. She huffed, muttered something under her breath, and stormed back toward them, dramatically wiping at her jacket like I'd thrown acid on her. Taylor leaned over and whispered, "You did not just do that," I whispered back. "Technically, I didn't. Physics did." We both burst out laughing, trying not to be obvious about it. For the rest of the wait, the girl stayed behind us, sulking and loudly complaining to her friends. Every once in a while I'd hear, "Some people are just jealous." I didn't bother engaging. I just sipped what was left of my tea and enjoyed the sweet peace of standing still in line without getting body checked. When we finally got into the venue, she made one last attempt to cut ahead near the door. The security guard noticed immediately and told her to get back in line. The look on her face was priceless. The concert itself was amazing. The crowd energy, the lights, the music, everything. But I swear the best moment of the night was watching karma happen in real time before the show even started. I know what I did wasn't exactly saintly, and yeah, maybe I could have just stepped aside or ignored her, but after 15 minutes of being shoved around and disrespected, that little accident felt like poetic justice. When Taylor and I got back to the car later, she said, "You know, you could have started a fight." I laughed and said, "Yeah, but instead I ended one." And honestly, I don't regret it. Sometimes the universe needs a tiny nudge to balance itself out, so apparently my little chai tea incident didn't end that night like I thought it did. I figured it was just one of those chaotic concert moments that everyone forgets once the music starts and the crowd moves on. But oh no, this girl had main character syndrome so bad she decided to make it a whole sequel. About a week later, Taylor and I were grabbing brunch at this cafe near campus. We were still riding the post-concert high, joking about how we'd relive that night 1,000 times over, minus the line drama. I was halfway through my avocado toast when Taylor suddenly froze. "Fork midair, don't look now," she whispered. But guess who just walked in? I didn't even have to look. I knew it was that girl, Sequins McDrama. She strutted in like she was walking a runway. Same attitude, different outfit. And because the universe has a dark sense of humor, she spotted us almost immediately. She stopped by our table, that fake sweet smile plastered on her face. "Oh, you're the tea girl," I blinked. Hi?" "Hi," she said, but her tone was venomous sugar. "You know, you never actually apologized for what you did." I set down my coffee. "Pretty sure I did. Right when it happened," Taylor tried to diffuse the tension. "It was an accident," she said quickly. "Everyone saw but Sequins cut her off. Accident or not, you ruined my jacket. That was real sequins, not cheap glitter crap. You have no idea how hard it was to clean." I stared at her. "You shoved me." She crossed her arms, smirking like she'd just cornered a suspect on Law and Order. "You could have moved. You didn't, so yeah. I think you did it on purpose." At that point, half the cafe was eavesdropping. I could feel my face heating up. Not out of guilt, but sheer disbelief. Who hunts someone down a week later over spilled tea? Taylor muttered, "You're unbelievable," under her breath. But Sequins didn't budge. Then, as if the universe wanted to crank up the absurdity, one of her friends from that night walked in too. Turns out they were meeting for brunch. The friend took one look at the situation and groaned. "Oh my God, are you still talking about that?" Sequins snapped her head around. It was humiliating. The friend, Bree, just sighed and sat down nearby, clearly done with the whole saga. Sequins glared at me one last time and said, "Whatever. You should be more careful next time." Then she turned dramatically and walked off to join Bree, mumbling about people with no class. Taylor looked at me, eyes wide, then burst out laughing. "You are officially her villain origin story, and honestly, she wasn't wrong, but it gets better." 2 days after that, I got a DM request on Instagram from the same girl. I didn't even follow her, but she must have found my account through tagged concert photos. Her message said, "Just so you know, I'm not mad anymore. I actually respect that you stood up for yourself." I was kinda drunk that night, Lowell. I just stared at it. I didn't even know what to say. It was so weirdly self-aware yet completely missing the point. Like, "Ma'am, this isn't an enemies to friends rom-com arc." I didn't respond, but she followed me anyway. She even liked one of my posts from months ago, which honestly freaked me out a bit. Taylor said, "You have a stalker fan now. Congrats." For a while, nothing else happened. I thought that was the end of it. Until last weekend, when my roommate Jenna hosted a little game night at our apartment. One of her coworkers showed up with their girlfriend, who turned out to be none other than Sequins. I almost spit out my drink when she walked through the door. She froze too, and we just stared at each other like some awkward sitcom moment. "Oh, you're here," she said slowly. "Apparently," I replied, trying to sound neutral. Jenna looked between us, totally confused. "Wait, you two know each other?" Taylor, who was also there, burst out laughing before I could even respond. "Oh, they know each other real well. There's tea involved," the girl groaned. "Oh my God, can we not?" To my surprise, though, she actually seemed embarrassed this time. Not angry. She even said, "Look, I was kind of a jerk that night. I'd been drinking and, yeah, I shouldn't have shoved people. I'm sorry." It took me a second to process it because I genuinely didn't expect that level of accountability. I just said, "Thanks, and sorry for, the chai incident." She laughed. Actually laughed. I deserved that. Karma was quicker than usual. The rest of the night was surprisingly fine. She was normal, funny even. We ended up on the same trivia team and crushed everyone. At one point she joked, "Guess we're even now, huh?" And I nodded. So, weirdly enough, the girl who once shoved me and got tea baptized in public became a semi-friend. We're not hanging out on weekends or anything, but if I see her around, it's not awkward anymore. She even sent me a playlist of Midnight Lantern songs afterward, with a note that said, "Truce?" And honestly, I took it. Life's too short to hold grudges over spilled tea, all right? So apparently the saga of the chai tea girl and the sequins girl wasn't quite done, because somehow, our weird little rivalry turned into the strangest almost friendship I've ever had in my life. After that game night truce, I really thought things would just fade. Maybe we'd follow each other on Instagram, like a few posts out of politeness, and then move on. But instead, it kept crossing back into my life in ways that made me feel like the universe was running a social experiment on me. It started a couple of weeks later when I ran into her again. This time totally by accident. I was at this little Saturday market downtown, grabbing an iced latte and wandering around the vendor stalls. There were people selling handmade jewelry, vintage clothes, random crafts, classic weekend vibes. I was flipping through a rack of thrifted jackets when I heard a voice behind me say, "You've got to be kidding me." I turned around, and there she was, sequins girl, only this time. She wasn't decked out in glitter or attitude. She was wearing this oversized hoodie, leggings and sneakers. Her hair was tied up, no makeup, sipping a smoothie. She looked normal, like an actual human being instead of the chaotic storm she'd been at the concert. We both laughed awkwardly. "I swear I'm not stalking you," I said immediately. She grinned. "No, I'm stalking you. Gotta make sure you don't have any teacups in hand." It broke the ice, and before I knew it, we were walking around together. It wasn't weird. It actually felt easy. She told me her name was Haley, which, somehow fit perfectly. We talked about the concert, the band, and then about how insane that night had been. She admitted that she'd been drinking before they even got there, and that she barely remembered half of it. Then she said something that actually stuck with me. I was going through some crap that month. That concert was supposed to be my escape, and I kind of projected my mess on everyone else. You just happened to be standing in the way. It was weird hearing that, because in my head she'd always been this cartoon villain who existed just to annoy me. But hearing her talk like that, honestly, self-aware, it made her feel human. We ended up sitting on a park bench for almost 2 hours, just talking. She told me about her job at a marketing firm, her breakup a few months earlier, and how she'd been trying to reinvent herself since then. I told her about my grad school applications and my total lack of balance between work and sleep. It was nice. By the time we said goodbye, she hugged me, like a genuine, thanks for not hating me kind of hug. After that, we started texting here and there. It started off light, sending memes, song recommendations, random TikToks, but then slowly grew into full conversations. She was surprisingly funny, a little chaotic, but in a way that made life more entertaining. Taylor thought the whole thing was hilarious. "So your arch nemesis is your new friend now?" she teased one night. "What's next, a joint podcast called Tea and Sequins?" Honestly, not a bad name, but of course, it couldn't stay perfect forever. About a month later, Haley invited me to her birthday party. I wasn't sure if I should go, but she texted me personally, saying, "Please come. I owe you a drink, not chai, promise." So I went. It was at her apartment downtown, and it was a full-blown event. String lights, music, people dressed way cooler than I'll ever be. Everyone seemed to know her. She floated around the room like she was born to host. At first, everything was great. She introduced me to her friends. Some recognized me from her stories. "So you're the tea girl," and we all laughed about it. But then somewhere between the cocktails and the playlist switch, Haley's ex showed up. Apparently he hadn't been invited. I didn't catch his name at first, but he had that brooding, I wear leather jackets and make bad decisions kind of vibe. He walked straight up to her, and their conversation escalated fast. Like you could feel the tension across the room. She was trying to play it cool, but her voice kept rising, and eventually, she stormed off to the balcony. Everyone awkwardly avoided eye contact. For some reason. Maybe because I'd seen her at her worst and survived. I followed her outside. She was standing there with her arms crossed, blinking fast like she was trying not to cry. "Hey," I said quietly. "You okay?" She sighed. Why do I always let people like that back in? I didn't have an answer, so I just stood there with her, letting the silence fill the space. After a minute, she laughed a little and said, You're the only person who's ever called me out and then stuck around." I said, "Well, maybe you needed someone to spill tea on you to reset your karma." She laughed again, genuinely this time, and bumped my shoulder. We ended up talking for another hour out there. Eventually, her ex left. The vibe calmed down, and we went back inside. When I was leaving, she hugged me again and said, "You're kind of the best accidental friend I've ever made." And here's the weirdest part. I realized she wasn't wrong. I don't know if we'll stay close forever. Maybe this friendship will fade out like most random adult friendships do. But for now, it's weirdly comforting to know that something that started with spilled tea and irritation turned into this messy, genuine connection. Sometimes people come into your life in the dumbest, most chaotic ways. But maybe that's how it's supposed to happen. Because now, when I think back to that concert night, I don't just remember being shoved or annoyed. I remember the start of something unexpectedly human. And honestly, that's a pretty good trade-off for one ruined chai. Stories number 6. Telling my dad I can't see how his prank was funny. I grew up in a house where humor was basically a second language. My dad, Kevin, has always been the type to find a joke in everything. Pranks, teasing, sarcastic comments, you name it. My mom used to say that if you took away his sense of humor, he wouldn't know how to talk to people. Sometimes it was lighthearted and fun, but other times it crossed lines, and when it did, his defense was always the same. Relax, it's just a joke. I'm 24 now and live about 3 hours away from my parents. I visit a few times a year, usually for holidays or birthdays. And even though I love them, I've learned to keep my expectations low when it comes to my dad's idea of fun. Last month, I drove down for my mom's birthday weekend. It was supposed to be a calm couple of days. My mom, Lisa, wanted to have a small backyard barbecue, invite a few neighbors and relatives. Nothing huge. I brought my boyfriend Drew, because he'd only met my parents once before, and I thought it'd be nice for him to see where I grew up. When we got there, everything seemed fine. My dad greeted us like he always does. A big hug for me and a firm handshake for Drew. He immediately started cracking jokes about interrogating the new guy. But Drew handled it well. I was honestly proud of how polite and patient he was. Things were smooth until the afternoon of the barbecue. Everyone was hanging out in the yard. The grill was going, music playing, kids running around. It was perfect. Then my dad got that look he always gets when he's planning something. My stomach dropped a little. He called everyone's attention and said, "Hey everyone, I've got a little surprise for my daughter." I remember glancing at Drew, and he smiled like, "Oh, this should be cute." I wasn't so sure. My dad went into the garage and came back holding a small box. He grinned at me and said, "We were cleaning out the attic and found this. It's from when you were 16. Thought you'd get a kick out of it." He handed me the box in front of everyone. I opened it, and inside was an old pregnancy test box. For a second, I froze because I had no idea what it was doing there. My dad burst out laughing before I could even process it. "Don't worry," he said, still chuckling. "It's empty, but man, you should have seen your face." Everyone looked confused. Some laughed awkwardly. My mom muttered, "Kevin, seriously," under her breath. Drew looked completely blindsided. I felt this wave of embarrassment hit me, like the kind you feel in high school when you trip in front of your crush. My dad thought he was being hilarious. "Come on, it's funny," he said. "You were so secretive as a teenager. We were sure we'd find something like that eventually." I didn't say anything right away. I just put the box down on the table and tried to change the subject. But the mood had already shifted. People started walking off to grab more food or talk about something else. Drew quietly asked if I was okay, and I nodded, but my face was burning. Later that night, after everyone had left and my mom went inside, I pulled my dad aside. I told him flat out, "That wasn't funny. You embarrassed me in front of everyone?" "And Drew?" He looked genuinely surprised. "What?" "Oh, come on, it was a joke. You know I don't mean anything by it." "You're too sensitive," I said. "Dad, it wasn't about meaning harm. It was just inappropriate. Why would you bring up something like that, even as a joke and in front of everyone?" He shrugged. "Because it was funny. Everyone laughed." I said, "No. They laughed because they were uncomfortable." I wasn't laughing. That's when he got defensive. "You've changed," he said. "You used to laugh with me about stuff like that. Now you act like I'm some villain for trying to lighten the mood." That part hit me, because I had laughed at a lot of his jokes before, even when they were at my expense, just to keep the peace. I'd gotten used to playing along, even when I didn't find them funny. But this time I didn't want to. I told him, "If making people uncomfortable is your way of lightening the mood, maybe it's not humor. Maybe it's just you not reading the room." He scoffed and said, "Oh, give me a break. I can't say anything anymore without someone getting offended." Then he walked away, muttering something about kids these days. The next morning was awkward. My mom apologized for him, saying, "He doesn't think before he acts," which I know is true. But I was tired of excuses. Drew and I left early, and the car ride home was quiet for a long time. Eventually Drew said, I get that your dad was trying to be funny, but yeah, that was rough. A few days later, my dad texted me a meme about how kids today can't take a joke. I didn't respond. It's been 3 weeks since then, and he still hasn't reached out again. My mom called last week to check in and said, "He's sulking because you made him feel like the bad guy." I told her I didn't care. Because if that's what it takes for him to reflect, so be it. I don't want to cut him off. But I also don't want to keep letting him treat my boundaries like a punchline. I've started realizing that humor can sometimes just be a shield for being inconsiderate. And when you stop laughing along, people like my dad don't know what to do with that. I love him. I really do. But that night showed me something I can't unsee. That he'd rather double down than admit a joke went too far. So yeah, I told my dad I didn't see how his prank was funny. And for the first time, I didn't back down or apologize for not laughing. It's been about 2 months since that barbecue. And things between my dad and me have been complicated. I wouldn't say we're not speaking, but the conversations we've had since then have been short, awkward, and mostly about surface-level stuff. Weather, work, sports. The kind of small talk that fills silence but doesn't fix anything. After that day, I think we both went into our corners. He felt attacked, and I felt dismissed. My mom's been trying to play mediator, but that hasn't really helped. She's the type who avoids conflict until it quietly disappears. But I'm not that person anymore. I'm not letting things just fade away like I used to. A few weeks after I left, I sent my dad a message. I kept it simple. Told him I loved him, but that what happened at Mom's birthday really hurt me. I said that I wasn't angry, just disappointed that he didn't seem to care how uncomfortable it made me feel. He didn't respond for 3 days. When he finally did, it was just, "Didn't mean to hurt you, thought it was harmless. Let's move on." That reply hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't malicious, it was just so typical of him. Sweep it under the rug, no accountability, just move on. But you can't move on from something when the other person refuses to even see it. I didn't reply, I needed space. Meanwhile, Drew's been a rock through all of it. He keeps reminding me that it's not unreasonable to want respect from your own parent, but he also gently pushes me to see my dad for who he is, not who I wish he'd be. "Some people think love means never challenging them," he said once. But it's the opposite. You called him out because you care. That stuck with me. Then last weekend, my mom called and said they were hosting a small family dinner and wanted me and Drew to come. I hesitated, but she sounded genuinely hopeful. "He's calmed down," she said. "I think he feels bad, even if he won't say it, so we went." When we got there, my dad greeted Drew first, shook his hand and said, "Hey, good to see you." Man, it was the first time he'd spoken to him since the prank. Then he looked at me and said, "Hey, kiddo," in this careful tone, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to be casual yet. Dinner was surprisingly normal. My mom made lasagna. My dad cracked a few jokes, but safe ones this time, about the dog stealing food or my uncle's bad golf swing. For a while, I wondered if we might actually get through the night without tension. Then, right after dessert, he said, "So, you're still mad at me, huh?" The room went quiet. My mom shot him a look, but I decided to just answer honestly, "No, I'm not mad. I just wish you understood why it upset me." He leaned back in his chair and sighed. "I was just trying to make people laugh." "I didn't think you'd take it so personally. I know you didn't mean to hurt me," I said, "but I'm not 16 anymore. It's different when you're an adult being laughed at in front of your boyfriend and family." I felt humiliated, Dad. He looked at me for a long second. Then, to my surprise, he actually nodded. I guess I didn't think about it that way. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was the first time he hadn't immediately deflected. My mom looked relieved, like she'd been holding her breath the whole time. Drew gave me this small, reassuring smile under the table, like, "You did it." After dinner, my dad and I sat outside on the porch. He didn't say much at first, just sipped his beer and watched the trees. Then he said, "You know, when I was your age, my dad never took anything seriously. I guess I picked up the same habit. I joke when I shouldn't," I told him. "You can still be funny without making someone else feel small." He nodded again and said, "Yeah, I'm starting to get that." It wasn't emotional or dramatic. It was quiet, which felt fitting. My dad's not the type to pour his heart out, but that small admission was huge for him. Since then, things have felt lighter. He still sends me memes, but they're actually funny now. Harmless dad jokes, no jabs or digs. He even texted me a few days ago saying he and Mom were planning a trip up to visit in the fall. "No surprises this time," he added. That made me laugh. I don't think my dad will ever completely change, but maybe he doesn't have to. Maybe it's enough that he's trying to meet me halfway, to understand that humor doesn't have to come at someone's expense. For the first time in a long while, I feel like he actually heard me, and honestly, that's all I wanted. It's been about 6 months since that porch conversation, and I'd be lying if I said everything between my dad and me is magically perfect now. It's better, definitely, but it's the kind of better that comes from steady work. Awkward pauses, small wins, and a lot of quiet recalibration. When the fall rolled around, my parents came up for that weekend visit they'd promised. I was nervous, not gonna lie. The last time I saw them in my space, I was still in college and Dad was making jokes about my messy apartment and hipster decor. This time, though, it felt different. He texted ahead of time asking if there was anything we wanted him to bring. A total shock considering he's usually a, we'll just pick something up on the way type of guy. They arrived on a Friday evening. Drew had grilled some chicken and veggies, and I'd made a salad that my mom pretended wasn't store-bought. The first half hour was polite, kind of stilted, but then something shifted. My dad complimented the apartment, genuinely, and asked about the new job I'd started a month earlier. Normally, he'd make some sarcastic remark like, "So you're the boss now?" But instead, he actually listened. He asked questions about what I did, how I liked my team, and what kind of projects I wanted to move into. It wasn't a big thing, but it felt big, like he'd finally decided I wasn't a kid anymore. The next morning, we went out for breakfast at this little diner near our place. It was packed, and we ended up squeezed into a booth by the window. At one point, the waitress brought our food and accidentally spilled a bit of coffee on my dad's sleeve. I braced myself, expecting him to crack some "watch where you're going" joke, but he didn't. He just smiled, waved it off, and said, "No harm done." That might sound small, but my dad used to live for those little power moments, where he could act mildly inconvenienced and make someone squirm. Seeing him just let it go, that was new. Later that day, we went for a walk downtown. He and Drew ended up talking about sports, while Mom and I ducked into a couple of shops. When we came back out, I saw Dad laughing at something Drew said. Not mocking or teasing her, just genuinely laughing. It was surreal. Drew caught my eye and gave me a quick wink like, "See? Progress." That night, after my parents had gone to bed, Drew and I were cleaning up and he said, "You know, I think he's trying. He might not know how to apologize in words, but this is his way," and he was right. My dad's not a talker, not when it comes to feelings. But that weekend was the first time in my life I saw him show respect instead of just expecting it. Then, a few weeks after they left, something happened that really brought everything full circle. I got a call from my dad on a random Tuesday night. He never calls unless it's about car maintenance or some sports event. When I picked up, he said, "Hey, so, your cousin Jenna's engagement party is this weekend. You coming?" I said I wasn't sure yet. It was a long drive, and I had a work thing that Monday. He said, "That's fine. I just wanted to check before your mom started pestering you. Also," he paused, "I wanted to ask you something." That was new. Too, he told me his coworker's birthday was coming up, and he was thinking about pulling a prank, the kind of harmless, classic dad prank he'd always done. But this time, he said, "You think that'd go over okay, or should I skip it?" I almost didn't know how to respond. The man who used to think everyone's too sensitive was asking if his joke might hurt someone. I said, "If you have to ask, maybe skip it." He laughed and said, "Yeah, that's kind of what I figured." Then, after a short pause, he said, "I've been thinking about what you said, about humor not having to come at someone's expense. You were right. I've been an ass about that for a long time." I think I sat there stunned for a full 10 seconds. He'd never said something like that to me before. Not once. I told him I appreciated it, and that it meant a lot to hear. He brushed it off with his usual, "Don't make it weird." But I could hear the smile in his voice. It's funny, when all this started, I wanted some grand apology, a big emotional scene where he'd finally acknowledge everything. But I've realized that's not who he is, and maybe that's okay. The growth isn't in what he says, it's in what he does. Now, when I visit my parents, things actually feel calm. We laugh, together this time. And the jokes don't sting anymore. He even teases Drew occasionally, but it's gentle, more like he's trying to include him rather than embarrass him. It's been a long road getting here, and I still flinch sometimes, waiting for the old version of him to reappear. But every time he chooses kindness instead of the easy punchline, I see a little bit of the man I always hoped he could be. And maybe that's the real win in all this. Not forcing someone to change overnight, but watching them slowly become better because you finally drew a line. I walked out of my boyfriend's house mid-dinner after his mom insulted me for bringing a store-bought cake. I've been dating Tyler for about a year and a half now. Things were going great. He's kind, funny, and genuinely one of the most patient people I've ever met. But there was always this unspoken tension when it came to his family, especially his mom, Diane, from the very beginning. I could tell she didn't quite approve of me. I wasn't from the same type of family as hers. They're upper middle class, country club types who have matching table settings for every season. My family's more the paper plates at the barbecue kind, and we're fine with that. Tyler always brushed off my concerns. He'd say things like, "You're overthinking it," or "Mom just takes time to warm up to people." But deep down, I knew she didn't like me. Not because of anything I did, but because I wasn't her kind of person. Anyway, last month, Diane invited me to a family dinner at their house. It was supposed to be a big deal because it was her birthday, and she'd specifically told Tyler that I was welcome to come. I thought, maybe this is her olive branch. I asked Tyler what I should bring, and he said, "Just bring dessert. Mom loves chocolate cake." So, the day of, I had to work late. I didn't have time to bake something from scratch, so I stopped at this nice bakery downtown and picked up a beautiful chocolate ganache cake. It wasn't cheap either, $36, but it looked and smelled amazing. When I got to their house, Diane greeted me with that tight smile people give when they're pretending to be polite. She looked at the cake box and said, "Oh, you brought something?" I smiled and said, "Yeah, I got a chocolate ganache cake from Sweet Haven Bakery. Tyler said you love chocolate." She took the box, looked at it for a second, then said with this fake laugh, "Oh, store-bought? How convenient." I froze. Tyler tried to laugh it off, saying, "Mom, it's from that fancy bakery you love." But she just hummed and walked it to the kitchen. The whole dinner was awkward after that. She kept throwing these little digs, asking me if I ever cook, or saying things like, "When I was your age, I made everything from scratch." That's how you show real care. I kept trying to smile, to play it cool. But every comment made me want to sink through the floor. Even Tyler looked uncomfortable, but he didn't say much. He'd just try to change the subject or nudge my knee under the table, like that would fix it. Finally, it was dessert time. Diane brought out the cake, still in the box, and said, "Well, here's the bakery's contribution to the evening." She actually rolled her eyes. Everyone laughed, not cruelly, but awkwardly. Tyler's dad chuckled. His sister Kayla covered her mouth like she was hiding a smile. And I just sat there, feeling like the punchline. Diane cut into the cake, and after tasting it, she said, "Well, I suppose it's not terrible. You can tell it's not homemade. Though, the texture's too uniform. You can't fake that real homemade touch." That was it. Something in me just snapped. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene. I just quietly put my napkin down, stood up and said, "Thank you for dinner. I think I'm going to head home." The whole table went silent. Tyler looked shocked. Diane blinked, clearly not expecting that reaction. He said, "Wait, what? You're leaving?" I nodded. "Yeah, I think it's best." Diane gave this fake laugh and said, "Oh, don't be so sensitive, sweetheart." I was just teasing. I smiled politely and said, "I know, but I don't find it funny." And I walked out. Tyler followed me to the driveway, asking me to stay, but I just said, "Tyler, she's made it clear she doesn't respect me, and you just sit there and let her. I can't keep doing this." He looked torn, like he wanted to defend me but didn't want to cause a scene. I told him, "If you can't stand up for me now, when will you?" And got in my car. He called later that night, apologizing over and over. He said he should have said something, that he was just caught off guard. I told him I needed space for the next few days. I didn't hear from him then. I got a text, not from him, but from Diane. She wrote, "I'm sorry if I offended you the other night. I was just joking around. Tyler told me you were upset. You'll have to forgive me. I didn't realize you were that sensitive." I didn't respond. A few days later, Tyler came by my apartment. He looked miserable. He said his mom felt bad, though her message proved otherwise, and that he wanted to make things right. I told him I wasn't sure I could be with someone who let me be humiliated in front of his family. He promised he'd talk to her, that he finally saw how she was treating me. I wanted to believe him, I really did. Then a week later, I got invited to Easter brunch with his family. Tyler said his mom wanted to try again. Against my better judgment, I went, And for the first 15 minutes, it was fine. She greeted me warmly, complimented my dress, even offered me coffee. I started to relax. Maybe she meant it. But then, halfway through brunch, she looked at the pastries I'd brought store-bought again. Because honestly, I'm not going to pretend I'm someone I'm not, and said, "Oh, these look lovely. I'll just put them with the other pre-made items." I looked at Tyler, and he just stared at his plate, didn't say a word. That was it for me. I didn't argue, didn't explain. I just stood up, grabbed my purse, and said, "You guys have a great Easter." Diane looked stunned. Tyler tried to stop me, but I walked right out. That was 3 weeks ago. I haven't seen or spoken to any of them since. Tyler texted me a few times saying he missed me, but I haven't answered, because the truth is, I finally realized something. I don't want to be part of a family that treats me like I'm lesser because I don't bake my own cake. It wasn't about the dessert. It was about respect. If a person can't see the love behind a gesture, even a simple store-bought one, then they'll never appreciate the person making it. I used to think walking away meant losing. But in this case, it feels like the only way to win. It's been about a month since I walked out of that Easter brunch, and I honestly didn't think I'd ever see or hear from Tyler or his mom again. But of course, life has a way of testing your resolve just when you start to find your peace. After that day, I made a point to focus on myself, went back to my old hobbies, started running again, and even took a few solo weekend trips. It felt good to reclaim my quiet. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't stressing about what I should wear to make someone's mother approve of me, or if I'd said the right thing at dinner. Then, out of nowhere, I got a text from Tyler one Friday night. It said, "Hey, I know you probably don't want to talk, but I really need to see you, please." I stared at it for a while. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part of me, the part that still remembered the man who used to make me laugh until I couldn't breathe, needed closure. So I told him we could meet at a coffee shop near my place. Neutral ground. When he walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked exhausted, thinner even, like he hadn't been sleeping much. He sat down, gave me this half smile and said, "You look good." I didn't say thank you. I just asked, "What's going on, Tyler?" He sighed, rubbed his face, and said, "You were right about my mom. About everything." Apparently, after I left, there was a huge argument between him and Diane. She'd said something snide about me, never being cut out for this family, and he finally lost it. He told her he was done letting her talk down to me, and that if she couldn't treat the person he loved with respect, then she wouldn't be part of his life. He said they hadn't spoken since, I'll admit. Hearing that hit me hard. For so long I'd felt like he was choosing her comfort over my dignity, and now he was standing up for me. Even when I wasn't around to see it. But I didn't let myself melt that easily. I asked, "Why now? Why not when she was doing it in front of me?" He nodded, almost like he'd been waiting for that question. "Because I didn't get it until you walked away. I thought you were overreacting. I thought if I kept the peace, things would calm down, but when you left, I saw how miserable you'd been, and how much I let her control things." He looked down at his coffee, then said quietly, "I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I should have." There was this long silence after that. I didn't know what to say. I appreciated the apology. It was genuine. But I also knew that apologies don't erase patterns. I'd seen how he froze every time his mom made a cutting remark. That kind of conditioning doesn't change overnight. He told me he wanted to try again, that he'd set boundaries, that he'd already told his mom she wasn't welcome to reach out to me unless she was ready to apologize sincerely. I asked him, "Did she?" He hesitated for just a second, but that hesitation said everything. "No," he admitted. "She said she won't apologize for speaking her mind." I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. "Then what are we doing, Tyler? You might have changed, but she hasn't, and she's not going to." He looked defeated. "I know, I can't stop thinking about you." I told him I needed to think. He nodded and said he understood. We parted ways that night with this quiet sadness between us. Not anger, just the kind of ache you feel when you know you love someone. But love isn't enough to fix what's broken. A few days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was Diane. Her voice was surprisingly soft. "Hi, this is Diane, Tyler's mom." I didn't say anything. She went on. "I wanted to reach out personally. I know I owe you an apology. I thought about what you said, that I don't respect you. And you were right. I'm not used to being called out, and I handled it poorly. I almost didn't believe what I was hearing. She continued, "You didn't deserve the way I treated you. You were trying to be kind, and I was petty. That's on me." I was stunned. I didn't even know what to say. She said she didn't expect forgiveness, but she wanted me to know she was trying to do better, that she didn't want to be the reason her son lost someone he cared about. I told her I appreciated her saying that, and that it did mean something to hear it. After that, she asked if we could meet sometime. Just to talk. I told her I'd think about it. When I hung up, I sat there for a long time, just processing everything. Part of me was suspicious, wondering if Tyler had pushed her into it. But another part of me, the part that's been learning to give grace without sacrificing boundaries, thought maybe it didn't matter. Whether she meant it or not, she finally acknowledged it. That weekend, Tyler texted again, saying, "She called you, didn't she?" I didn't ask her to. She did it herself, I told him. "Yeah, she did." Then he said something that stuck with me. Maybe this is a start. I don't know if he meant a start for me and him, or for me and his mom. Maybe both. I haven't given him an answer yet. I'm not sure I'm ready to walk back into that house, or that family dynamic, even if things have shifted a little. But for the first time in months, I feel like I'm holding the power. The choice is mine, not theirs. And honestly, that alone feels like progress. Maybe we'll get there someday. Or maybe the lesson was just to learn when to stand up and walk away. Either way, I'm finally okay with whichever path it turns out to be. A couple of weeks passed after Diane's unexpected phone call, and I genuinely thought things were settling into a strange kind of calm. I hadn't made any decisions yet about Tyler, but we'd been texting. Short, careful messages that hovered somewhere between friendly and fragile. There was no mention of getting back together, but the way he talked, I could feel he wanted to rebuild something. Then, out of nowhere, he texted one afternoon, "Mom invited me and you to dinner, just us three. She wants to apologize in person." I just stared at the message for a full minute. Part of me immediately tensed up. The same instinctive reaction I always had when her name came up. But another part of me, I don't know, felt curious. Was she actually serious about making amends? Or was this just another performance for Tyler's benefit? I replied, "I'll think about it," he said. "That's fair. Take your time. No pressure." For the next few days, I kept going back and forth. My best friend Emily thought I should go, just to see what she does when she can't hide behind passive-aggressive comments. My mom, on the other hand, said, "You don't owe anyone that energy, sweetheart. Especially not someone who humiliated you." Both of them had valid points, but I think what made me finally agree was something I hadn't expected. Curiosity, not hope, not forgiveness. Just curiosity about whether this woman was capable of owning her behavior to my face. So I told Tyler I'd go. The dinner was set for a Friday evening at Diane's house, the same house where all the tension had started. I hadn't been there since Easter. When I pulled up, my stomach was in knots. The porch lights glowed softly, and I could see Diane's silhouette through the window. Setting the table, Tyler opened the door before I even knocked. He looked genuinely relieved that I showed up. He gave me a small smile and said, "You look great." I thanked him, and he led me inside. Diane greeted me in the foyer. She looked different, tired maybe, but softer somehow. She was wearing a simple cardigan and had her hair tied back. No over-the-top hostess act this time. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. I nodded. "Thanks for inviting me." We sat down to eat. Roast chicken, potatoes, salad. And for a while, it was surprisingly normal. No snide remarks, no pointed comments, just small talk, but it felt tense underneath. Like everyone was waiting for the real reason we were there. Finally, after dinner, Diane set her fork down and said, "I owe you a proper apology." I didn't say anything. I just waited. She looked me in the eye, which she'd rarely done before, and said, "I was cruel to you. And I've been thinking about why. I think part of it was control. I wanted things to be a certain way for my son, and I didn't like that I couldn't shape you into what I thought was right." I blinked. "That level of honesty? I didn't expect that," she continued. "You didn't deserve that. You were trying to show kindness. And instead of appreciating it, I took it as an insult to my standards. That wasn't fair. You have every right to be angry." I could feel my throat tighten. I'd imagined this moment before, her apologizing, but it never felt real. "I know saying sorry doesn't erase it," she said softly, "but I wanted you to know I see it now." For a moment, I couldn't even speak. The anger I'd been carrying for months, the humiliation, the resentment, it all just loosened a little. I wasn't ready to forgive, but I could finally breathe again. I said, "Thank you. That means more than you know. I just wanted to feel respected, that's all." She nodded. "You should have been. And if it means anything, I think you've made my son a better man." Tyler reached over then and gently took my hand. It was subtle, but the gesture said more than any words could. After dinner, Diane offered coffee and dessert, homemade this time, which honestly made me laugh a little internally. She even said, "I baked this myself." Figured I'd return the gesture. There was no sarcasm, no edge, just humanity. The evening ended calmly. When I left, Diane actually hugged me. A light, tentative hug, but it felt real. She said, "I hope we can start over," I told her. "We'll see." But this was a good first step. When I got to my car, Tyler followed me out again. We stood by my car for a while, neither of us saying much. Then he said, "Thank you for giving her a chance." I looked at him and said, "I didn't do it for her, I did it for me." He nodded. "I know, but I'm still grateful." Then he asked carefully, "Do you think we could try again? Maybe take things slow?" And here's where I surprised even myself. I didn't say no, I told him, "Maybe. But if we do, it has to be different this time. No pretending everything's fine. No staying quiet when things aren't." He smiled, a little sadly. "Deal." We've been talking again since then. Not back together yet, but taking slow, cautious steps. Coffee dates, walks at the park, conversations that don't revolve around his family. Diane even sent me a text last week. Just a simple, "Thank you again for coming to dinner. I meant what I said. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if Tyler and I will make it, or if Diane will truly keep changing. But for the first time, I feel like the power dynamic has shifted. I'm not the outsider trying to earn my place anymore. I'm just me, someone who deserves to be respected. Whether my cake comes from a bakery or my own oven, and maybe that's the real victory." It's been almost 6 months since that dinner with Diane, and it feels surreal looking back on how everything unfolded. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd ever sit across from that woman again, laughing over coffee, even, I would have said they were out of their mind. But here we are. And a lot has changed. Not just between her and me, but between Tyler and me too. After that dinner, we didn't jump straight back into being a couple. It took time, a lot of quiet conversations, late-night talks, and unlearning old habits. I needed to see if Tyler could truly be his own person around his mother. And to his credit, he worked hard at it. He went to therapy, on his own, without me pushing, to deal with his guilt and people-pleasing tendencies. He told me later that he realized he'd spent most of his life trying to keep his mom happy, even if it meant losing himself in the process. And honestly, seeing him put in that effort was what finally allowed me to open up again. We started seeing each other more often, but this time on our terms. No family dinners, no forced appearances, no walking on eggshells, just us, hikes, movie nights, cooking simple dinners in my apartment, yes. Even store-bought pasta sauce made it to the table. It felt real again, peaceful. Then one day, a few months in, Tyler asked if I'd come with him to his parents' house for his dad's birthday. I hesitated at first. Part of me still had that instinctive knot in my stomach at the thought. But he said, "It's going to be different this time. I promise." And to my surprise it was. When we arrived, Diane greeted me at the door with genuine warmth. Not the stiff politeness from before. It was different. She gave me a small hug and said, "I made that lemon pie you like." It wasn't forced, it was human. Throughout dinner, she actually asked about my work, my hobbies, and even joked that she's been trying not to judge anyone's desserts these days. Everyone laughed, including me. I think that was the first time I'd ever truly laughed with her instead of around her. At one point during the night, she pulled me aside in the kitchen while everyone else was in the living room. I thought, oh no, here it comes, but instead, she said something I didn't expect. "You know, I used to think you were wrong for my son, because you didn't fit into this family. But now I see that you're exactly what he needed. You challenge him, you make him better, and you've taught me something too. That kindness doesn't always look like perfection." I just stood there, kind of stunned. Then I said, "That means a lot, Diane. Really." And she smiled, a real, warm smile, and said, "Well, don't get too comfortable. I still expect you to bring that amazing chocolate ganache cake next time." It was the first time one of her jokes didn't sting. It actually made me laugh. From that night on, things just kept improving. She started reaching out occasionally, not to pry or control, but to genuinely connect. She even texted me once asking for the name of the bakery where I'd bought that original cake. saying, "I want to try something new for the church fundraiser." I almost framed that message. As for Tyler and me, we're officially back together. But we're both different now. Healthier, more aware. We've learned how to set boundaries. With each other, with his family, and even with ourselves. We've talked about the future, but we're not rushing anything. He asked me once if I could ever see us getting married someday, and I told him, maybe, but only if the guest list includes one store-bought cake front and center. He laughed. But I think he understood the meaning behind it. Because that cake, that stupid, simple cake, became a symbol of everything that went wrong. And everything we had to learn to make right. It represented being judged, dismissed, and underestimated. But it also became the turning point for all of us. A few weeks ago, Diane invited me to help her with a small family get-together she was hosting. She said, "You're better at making things feel comfortable than I am." That one sentence hit harder than any apology ever could. It wasn't just an admission. It was respect, genuine, mutual respect. And maybe that's all I ever wanted from her in the first place. I won't pretend everything's perfect, because it's not. There are still small moments when she slips back into her old habits, or when Tyler freezes out of instinct. But the difference now is, we all see it, we talk about it, we fix it before it festers. If someone had told me back then that this story, which started with humiliation and hurt, would end in growth and understanding, I would have laughed, but now I realize something important. Sometimes the hardest people to deal with are the ones who teach you the most about yourself. I learned how to stand up for myself without burning everything down. Tyler learned how to set boundaries, and Diane, well, she learned that love doesn't always come in the shape of a homemade cake. Last weekend when I went over there, Diane handed me a slice of that same chocolate ganache cake from Sweet Haven Bakery. She grinned and said, "Thought I'd save us both the trouble." And just like that, the tension that once lived in that house was gone, replaced by something softer. Real. It's strange how something so small can change everything. But I guess that's life, full of little turning points disguised as store-bought desserts. And this time, when I took a bite, it tasted like peace. Stories number 8. I made my fiancé pay for the catering again, after he canceled it behind my back. So, this whole mess started over something that was supposed to be simple. Wedding food? If you've ever planned a wedding, you know that catering can either make or break it. And also that it's expensive enough to make you reconsider eloping to Vegas. My fiancé Eric and I had been engaged for about 9 months, and our wedding was set for early next summer. Everything was pretty much organized. Venue, photographer, florist, and the catering that I spent weeks researching and taste testing. We'd agreed early on to split the major wedding expenses since we both have decent jobs and wanted to feel like equal partners. He's an engineer, and I work as a dental hygienist. We're not loaded, but we'd saved up enough to have a modest but nice wedding. The catering was my baby. I found this small family-owned company that did farm-to-table style food. Fresh, seasonal, amazing presentation. The works. They weren't cheap, but their menu was incredible. We tried it together at the tasting, and he literally said, "This is the best chicken I've ever had." So we signed the contract and put down a deposit. Fast forward to last month, I was at work when I got a call from the catering company. The woman sounded confused and a little concerned. She said, "Hi, we just wanted to confirm the cancellation you requested before we process the refund." I literally froze mid-step in the hallway. "Cancellation?" I said, "What cancellation?" She told me that someone named Eric had called earlier that day and said the wedding was postponed indefinitely. He'd asked them to cancel the catering order and issue a refund to his card. I felt my heart drop. I told her not to cancel anything and that I'd sort it out. Then I immediately called him. When he answered, I didn't even bother with small talk. "Why did you cancel the catering?" He paused for a second, then said, "Oh, yeah. I was going to tell you about it tonight." "Tell me what?" "That we don't need to spend nearly $7,000 on food when my mom's friend offered to cater it for cheaper." I swear I saw red. He went on like he'd done something heroic, apparently. His mom had mentioned that her friend, who does catering sometimes, could do the food for half the price. Never mind that I'd already put down a non-refundable deposit, spent hours coordinating the menu, and made sure it worked for my vegetarian relatives. He didn't even talk to me about it. He just canceled it behind my back, I said. "You don't just cancel something like that without asking me." He got defensive. "I'm just trying to save us money. You've been going overboard with all this wedding stuff anyway. It's food, not art." "It's our wedding," I snapped. "And we agreed on this months ago." He started getting snippy. saying things like, "You're overreacting," and "You should be thanking me for finding a cheaper option." I was furious, but also deeply hurt. It wasn't just about the catering. It was about him making a unilateral decision that affected both of us. That night, when he came home, I had the contract printed out and waiting on the kitchen counter. I told him the caterers hadn't processed the cancellation yet, so I told them to keep everything as planned. But the deposit was non-refundable, so now if he wanted to change it, he would be paying for the new catering out of his own pocket. He rolled his eyes and said, "You're being ridiculous," I said. "No, I'm being fair. You canceled it without me, so if you want your mom's friend to cater instead, you cover the new cost." He refused at first, saying it was our money. I told him no. It was his choice, and he could deal with it. We ended up in a massive argument that lasted for days. He said I was controlling. I said he was sneaky and disrespectful. At one point, he actually tried to guilt-trip me, saying, "You're making me pay twice for one thing," I said. "You made me lose a deposit for something we agreed on together." His mom even got involved, calling me to say I was being immature and that family comes first. I told her that family didn't include canceling someone's wedding plans without telling them. Eventually, after a lot of fighting and awkward silence, he gave in and agreed to cover the second catering service himself. The original company couldn't rebook us since he'd created too much confusion, so now we were stuck hiring someone else entirely. It's been a couple of weeks since that happened, and honestly things still feel tense between us. He's been distant, less affectionate, shorter in his texts, spending more time at work, late. I'm trying to tell myself it's just stress, but I can't shake the feeling that this whole thing revealed something bigger about him. Because if he's willing to make a major decision behind my back now, what's going to happen when we're actually married? Taylor, my maid of honor and best friend since high school, told me point blank, "If he's making choices like that without you now, it's a preview of what your marriage will look like." And I can't stop thinking about that. I've tried talking to him again calmly, explaining how betrayed I felt, but he keeps brushing it off. He keeps saying I'm holding a grudge, and that I should move on. But how do you move on from realizing your partner doesn't respect your voice in something that's supposed to be ours? Sometimes I look at him now and feel this coldness I never used to feel. Like I'm seeing him clearly for the first time. He thinks it's about the catering. It's not. It's about trust. It's about partnership. And I don't know if we still have that. I haven't called off the wedding, yet. But I did tell him I want to pause planning until we go to couples counseling. He said fine, but he's been moody ever since. Maybe I'm overreacting, but I can't stop feeling like this was a giant red flag I almost ignored. All I know is, if someone's willing to cancel your plans behind your back once, they'll do it again when it really matters. And no amount of saving money is worth marrying someone who doesn't think your opinion deserves a phone call. So here's the update I honestly didn't expect to ever write. I thought things with Eric might calm down after a few counseling sessions, or maybe we'd find a middle ground and move forward. I was wrong. It's been a few months since the catering fiasco, and what started as a disagreement over wedding planning turned into something much bigger. Something that made me really rethink the person I was planning to spend my life with. After I told him I wanted to pause the wedding planning, he agreed, but it wasn't out of understanding. It was more like he was annoyed that I was making things complicated. I booked a few sessions with a couples therapist anyway, hoping it would help. To his credit, he came to the first one, but it went south fast. The therapist asked us to talk about the catering issue and how it made us feel. I said I felt blindsided and disrespected, that it wasn't about money but about trust. Eric crossed his arms, sighed loudly and said, "It's ridiculous that we're even here over a dinner bill." The therapist gently pushed back, saying it seemed like a pattern of decision-making and communication issues. But Eric brushed it off. "No, it's just her being dramatic," he said. I swear the room went cold. The therapist asked me to explain why it upset me so much. I said, because it wasn't a small thing. He didn't just forget to tell me about something. He made a major decision about our wedding behind my back. That's not a misunderstanding. That's disrespect. Eric rolled his eyes and said, "It's not like I canceled the wedding. Just the food." I remember looking at him then and realizing for the first time that he truly didn't get it. After that session, he didn't want to go back. He said therapy was a waste of money, and that I should just get over it. I tried to explain that trust issues don't just vanish because someone tells you to move on, but he wasn't interested. Meanwhile, his mom was still quietly stirring the pot. She kept making comments like, Maybe this wedding is too much stress for you both. Or, sometimes grooms just want a simpler event. It was like she couldn't help herself. One night, I found out just how deep her involvement went. I was going through some of the old wedding emails to recheck deposit details when I noticed a message thread between Eric and a new catering company. The weird thing was, it wasn't one I'd ever heard of. The email showed he'd already booked his mom's friend again. Without telling me, he literally tried to go behind my back again. I confronted him immediately. I said, "You booked another caterer after all this? After everything we talked about?" He didn't even deny it. He just said, "I didn't want to fight about it anymore, so I handled it." I said, "Handled it? You mean lied about it?" That's when he exploded. He yelled that I was impossible to please, that I was micromanaging everything, and that I should just be grateful someone actually wants to marry me. I froze. I think part of me knew he had that kind of cruelty in him. But hearing it out loud hit different. That was the last real argument we had. Because the next morning, I called off the wedding. I didn't make a scene, I just sat him down, told him calmly that I couldn't marry someone who treated partnership like a dictatorship, and that he needed to pack up his stuff by the end of the week. He stared at me for a long time before saying, "You're really throwing this away over a catering bill?" I said, "No, I'm ending this because you don't respect me, and you don't even see it." He left that night. I thought he might call or text the next day to apologize, but he didn't. Instead, his mom called me, furious. She accused me of embarrassing her son and overreacting like a child. I told her that her son's choices were his own and hung up. The weeks that followed were rough. I cried more than I cared to admit. I felt humiliated, like I'd built this future in my head that evaporated overnight. I kept replaying everything, wondering if I was too harsh or too emotional. But then I'd remember that moment in therapy, him calling me dramatic while I was trying to express real hurt. And I knew I'd done the right thing. A few of my friends helped me cancel the rest of the wedding plans. The catering company was sympathetic and even refunded a small portion of our deposit, which honestly made me tear up. The florist gave me store credit, the venue kept our deposit, but at that point, I just wanted peace. I took a solo weekend trip to the coast after that, just me, my journal, and way too many snacks. I sat on the beach and thought about what kind of person I wanted to be with someday. Someone who listens, someone who respects my input, someone who doesn't think saving money gives them the right to bulldoze over me. It's been about 3 months since everything ended. I've gone no contact with him and his family, and I've been slowly rebuilding. I started hiking again, reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with during wedding planning. And honestly, I feel lighter, Taylor told me the other day. "You dodged a bullet." And she's right, I didn't see it then, but now I do. The catering thing wasn't the problem, it was the symptom. The red flag waving right in front of me, begging me to notice, and I did, eventually. The hardest part was realizing that love isn't enough when respect is missing, so yeah. He got to save money in the end, but I got to save myself from a marriage that would have drained me dry. And honestly, that's worth every penny I lost, all right? So here's the next part of this whole ordeal, and honestly, I didn't expect things to spiral this way even after I thought everything was done. I thought when I called off the wedding, that would be it, a clean break. But apparently, some people don't understand what "we're done" means. It's been about 2 months since I ended things with Eric, and in that time, I've been focusing on trying to rebuild my routine. Work's been a lifesaver. I can throw myself into cleaning teeth and making small talk instead of replaying old arguments in my head. I even started hanging out more with Taylor and my other friends again, doing normal things like trivia nights and movie marathons. For a while, I didn't hear from him at all. His stuff was gone, his name was off the lease, and I thought we were officially done. I even deleted his number just to stop myself from overthinking. But then one random Wednesday night, my phone buzzed around midnight. I checked the screen and saw an unknown number with a text that said, "You can't just erase someone like that." My stomach dropped. I didn't even need to check the number to know it was him. I didn't reply. I wasn't going to. But over the next week, he sent more messages. Some angry, some apologetic, some just weird stuff like, "I miss you." Followed a few hours later by, "You ruined everything because you can't compromise." It was exhausting. It wasn't threatening exactly, but it felt manipulative. Like he was testing how far he could push before I'd respond. I didn't tell anyone at first, because I didn't want to seem paranoid. But then one night, after a late shift, I came home and saw something that made my blood run cold. Sitting on my porch was a white envelope, no return address, Just my name scrawled across it in his handwriting. Inside was a printed photo of us from our engagement shoot. Ripped in half. That's when I finally told Taylor everything. She immediately said, "You need to block him on everything and maybe call someone about this." She helped me go through my social media to make sure he couldn't reach me anywhere. I even emailed our landlord to ask if he'd been by the apartment. But the weirdest part? When I told Eric to stop contacting me, he actually apologized. Like, really apologized, not the fake, defensive kind of apology he'd given before. He texted me one last time from a different number, because I'd already blocked him, and said, "You were right, I was controlling. I thought I was helping. But I didn't respect you. I'm sorry. I'm getting help." He said he'd started seeing a therapist on his own after his mom told him she couldn't deal with his attitude anymore. I didn't reply to that message either. But I can't lie, it hit me. Because for all his flaws, I did once love him. And hearing that he might actually be trying to grow was weirdly bittersweet. Still, I wasn't going to get pulled back in. I've seen enough to know how easy it is to mistake remorse for change. Then came the wedding drama part 2. About a week after that last message, I got an email from the old catering company. The original one we'd hired before he canceled it. The subject line said, "Invoice follow-up." I almost ignored it, assuming it was a mistake. But when I opened it, I saw that Eric had tried to rebook them again, for next year, apparently. He told them we were back on and wanted to secure the same date, same menu, same everything. The only reason they emailed me was because my name was still on the original contract, so they wanted my confirmation before processing payment. I called the catering manager immediately, told her the engagement was over, and apologized profusely. She was kind but confused. She said, "I'm so sorry, he made it sound like everything was fine now." I just sat there holding the phone, wondering what universe he was living in where this all made sense. That night, Taylor came over with a bottle of wine, and we laughed about how surreal the whole thing was. "Girl, he's trying to gaslight a catering company now," she said. That's a new level of denial. But underneath the laughter, I could tell she was worried. I was too. So, I finally reached out to his sister, Mia, who I'd always gotten along with. She's the total opposite of him. Level-headed, kind, the type who quietly fixes family messes behind the scenes. I told her what was happening, and she sighed and said, "I'm sorry. He's not doing great. He's kind of spiraling since you left. Apparently, he'd moved back in with his mom but was barely leaving the house. He told his family he'd fix things, and that I'd come around eventually." I told her gently that wasn't going to happen. She said she'd make sure he stopped contacting me, and I thanked her, and for a few weeks, he actually did stop. No texts, no calls, no surprise envelopes, just silence. But even in the quiet, I felt this weird anxiety, like waiting for the other shoe to drop. I've been journaling a lot, trying to process everything. There's this mix of anger and pity I can't quite untangle. I'm angry he violated my trust, but part of me feels sorry for him, for being so unable to let go that he's stuck reliving what he ruined. Meanwhile, I've been healing. Slowly. I started therapy myself, not because I miss him, but because I realized I'd let a lot of small red flags slide before things blew up. The catering incident was just the loudest one. There were quieter ones, like him brushing off my opinions, making decisions for both of us, or joking about how I'd be a control-freak wife. Those weren't jokes. They were previews. Last weekend, I actually went to another wedding, my cousin's, and it was weirdly emotional. Seeing two people who genuinely work together on everything, supporting each other without ego, it hit me how different that was from what I almost settled for. After the reception, I sat in my car for a bit, thinking about everything that's happened. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel angry. I just felt free. I don't know if Eric will ever really understand what he did, or if his therapy is real, but that's not my responsibility anymore. All I know is that if you ever find yourself in a relationship where your voice doesn't matter, where you're treated like a co-star in someone else's movie, don't wait for it to get louder. Pay attention the first time they make you feel small, because you deserve someone who listens the first time. It's been about 6 months since everything went down with Eric, and I think this is finally the last time I'll ever talk about it. I wasn't planning on posting again, but so much has happened that I feel like I need to close this chapter properly. Not for him, but for me. After that catering rebooking fiasco, things finally went quiet. Completely quiet. No more calls, no texts, no weird packages on my porch. I honestly thought he'd finally accepted it was over. I even started to feel like myself again. sleeping better, not jumping every time my phone buzzed, just breathing normally for the first time in a year. Around February, I moved into a new apartment with a coworker, Hannah, who's the definition of calm energy. She's one of those people who lights incense, drinks herbal tea, and somehow makes chaos feel less chaotic. She helped me get rid of the last of the Eric-era stuff. The throw pillows he picked, the stupid framed quote he thought was inspirational, but was just condescending. All of it, life honestly started to feel good. My focus came back at work. I started jogging in the mornings. I got invited to my first solo dental conference and actually presented something I'd been working on for months. There were little moments where I'd think, wow, I almost didn't get here because I was too busy cleaning up someone else's mess. But then, out of nowhere, Eric's mom reached out. She called me from a number I didn't recognize, and at first I hesitated to answer, but when I did, she sounded fragile. She said, "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I wanted to tell you that Eric's in a treatment program. Apparently, things got really bad for him after his sister talked to him. He lost his job, got into debt, and eventually had what she described as a breakdown. She said the therapist he'd been seeing recommended an inpatient program, and he'd checked himself in a few weeks earlier." I didn't know what to say. I felt this uncomfortable mix of sadness and relief. She said he'd been writing letters as part of his therapy process, to people he'd hurt, and she wanted to ask if I'd be open to receiving one. I told her I needed to think about it. I didn't owe him closure, but I also didn't want to carry around bitterness forever. After a few days, I said yes. When the letter arrived, it was surprisingly sincere, handwritten, 4 pages long, no dramatics. He didn't beg for me back or try to justify anything. He just acknowledged what he did. He wrote, "I used control as a way to feel safe. I thought if I could manage everything, nothing would go wrong. But I was the one causing the harm. I know you don't owe me forgiveness. I just want you to know that I see it now." Reading it, I cried. Not because I missed him, but because it felt like the version of him I loved had finally surfaced. Even if it was too late, I didn't respond. But I kept the letter, not as a memento, but as a reminder of what accountability looks like. Even when it comes years too late, a few weeks after that, Mia, his sister, messaged me to say he'd finished his program and moved to another state to live near their uncle. She said he's working part-time and still going to therapy. It sounds like he's doing the work. I hope he keeps doing it. I genuinely mean that meanwhile, my own life has kept moving forward. I started dating someone new. Slowly. Carefully. His name's Adam, and he's the kind of person who asks before making decisions that affect both of us, which feels so foreign but comforting. We met through mutual friends, and we've been taking it at a pace that feels healthy. No rushing, no pretending, just 2 people figuring it out. When I told him the story about my ex, he didn't react with judgment or pity. He just said, "That must have been really lonely." And for some reason, that sentence hit me harder than anything else. Because yeah, it was lonely. Being in a relationship where you're constantly doubted, managed, and talked over is one of the loneliest things there is. But now I'm finally not lonely. I'm surrounded by people who care, who listen, who don't try to fix or control everything. The wedding venue we'd originally booked actually reached out a while back to confirm we wanted to cancel for good, and I remember thinking how symbolic that felt. Like the universe giving me a final, "Are you sure?" Before closing the tab, I confirmed it, deleted the old email thread, and poured myself a glass of wine to celebrate. There was this one night a few weeks ago when I met up with Taylor and some friends at a rooftop bar. The city lights were soft, there was music in the background, and I realized halfway through my drink that I hadn't thought about Eric in weeks. Not once I was laughing, really laughing, and I could feel it. That difference between surviving and living. I think that's what healing actually is. It's not some dramatic epiphany or clean slate. It's the quiet shift when you start recognizing yourself again in the mirror. If I could go back and tell my past self anything, it would be this: don't mistake control for love. Don't let someone convince you that peace means silence, or that compromise means losing your own voice. The right person won't need to shrink you to feel tall, so yeah, that's the end of it. No more catering disasters, no more envelopes, no more anxious waiting for texts that never should have come. Just me, moving on, building something better from the mess I walked away from, and for once, it actually feels like the story's over. And I get to be the one who decides how the next one begins. Stories number 9. I'm old enough to be your damn dad. When I first met Aaron, I didn't expect anything serious. I was 38, divorced for 4 years, and still figuring out how to enjoy life again after a messy breakup. She was 26, sharp as hell, sarcastic, and had that kind of energy that made everyone in the room pay attention without her even trying. We met at a mutual friend's trivia night. I was filling in for a coworker who bailed last minute, and she was there with her roommate. I remember she argued with me over a question about movie release dates, and when I turned out to be right, she rolled her eyes and said, "You probably saw it in theaters when it came out." That should have been my first clue that the age gap would be a thing, but we kept talking, one thing led to another, and by the end of the night, I'd bought her a drink, and we were sitting at the bar laughing like we'd known each other for years. We started texting the next day, then calling, then seeing each other on weekends. It was fun. Easy, actually. She didn't care that I was older, at least not at first. She liked that I had my life together, that I wasn't trying to figure myself out like most guys her age. I liked that she didn't take life too seriously and could still make me laugh about dumb things. But people noticed when we went out together. I could feel the looks. It wasn't always judgment, sometimes just curiosity, but it got under my skin. And then one night, it got under hers. We were at a new bar downtown with a few of her friends, and one of the guys, some dude named Tyler who clearly had a crush on her, said, "So how's it feel dating your dad's friend?" He meant it as a joke, but it landed like a punch. Everyone laughed except Erin. I tried to brush it off with a smile, but she wasn't having it. Later that night, when we got back to her place, she snapped at me. "Do you realize how weird it looks sometimes? Like people actually think you're my dad," I said. "You knew how old I was when we met." "Yeah," she said, "but it feels different when other people point it out." I didn't know what to say. I wasn't used to being the one on the defensive. My ex-wife, Dana, used to accuse me of being emotionally distant. Now, I could feel myself doing the same thing, shutting down instead of engaging. We didn't talk for 2 days after that. When we finally did, she apologized, said she didn't mean it how it came out. I believed her. I wanted to. Things went back to normal for a while, until she invited me to meet her parents. That's when it got complicated. Her mom, Leslie, was sweet, warm smile, polite, clearly wanted to make things comfortable. Her dad, on the other hand, barely looked at me. During dinner, he asked, "So how old are you again?" I told him, and he laughed, that low, disbelieving kind of laugh, and said, "Jesus Christ, I'm old enough to be your damn dad." The table went dead quiet. Erin looked mortified. I wanted to say something clever, but my mind blanked, so I just said, "Guess I'm in good company." Then, he didn't laugh. That night, Erin cried, said her dad embarrassed her and that she was sorry for how he acted. I told her it was fine, but it wasn't. It stuck with me. The look in his eyes when he said it, like he didn't just disapprove, he was disgusted. After that, something shifted between Erin and me. She still cared. I knew that. But she started making small comments that chipped away at things. "You don't really get TikTok." Or, "You probably don't know this show, it's before your time." Little things. I'd laugh them off, but deep down they stung. Then came her birthday dinner. A group thing at a restaurant with about 10 of her friends. I'd been dreading it, but I wanted to show up for her. Everything was fine until the waiter brought over the bill and one of her friends, this guy Mark, said, "I guess the sugar daddy's got it covered." It was meant as a joke. But the whole table laughed, even Erin. She caught herself after a second, but it was too late. I felt something inside me shut down. On the drive home I was quiet. She reached over and said, "Hey!" "You know they didn't mean it," I said. "Yeah." "But you laughed." She didn't say anything. We rode the rest of the way in silence. When we got back, I told her I needed a little space. She said she understood, but I could tell she was hurt. I wasn't angry at her, not exactly. I was angry at what we'd become. Somewhere along the way, the fun, easy connection we started with had turned into a running commentary on how different we were. I thought about ending it, but I didn't. We took a break for a week, and she texted me asking if we could talk when we met. She said she'd been thinking about how she'd let other people's opinions get into her head, that she really did love me, and that what mattered was how we felt. I wanted to believe her, so I did. Things got better for a while. We took a trip to Asheville, hiked, stayed in a cabin. It felt good again, but when we got back, real life crept in. I started noticing the differences again. What we wanted, how we communicated, how I was starting to think about settling down again, while she was still figuring out her career. The age gap wasn't just a number anymore, it was a lifestyle difference. A couple months later, she told me she got an offer for a new job, in Portland. Across the country, she was excited, and I was proud of her. But I could tell what she wasn't saying. That it didn't make sense for me to follow. We had one of those long, quiet conversations where no one says the actual words, but both people understand. She cried, I held her, and that was it. We didn't end badly. We still text sometimes. Birthdays, holidays, the occasional meme. She's seeing someone now, closer to her age, and I'm happy for her. I've gone on dates since then, but I haven't connected with anyone quite like her. I think part of me will always measure people against what we had. When I think back to her dad saying, I'm old enough to be your damn dad. I realize now it wasn't just a line meant to shame me. It was a mirror. He saw what I didn't want to admit. That maybe we were living on borrowed time. Still, I don't regret a second of it. Aaron reminded me what it felt like to be seen, to laugh again, to care about someone deeply after thinking I was past that. And even though it ended, I'll always be grateful that she walked into that trivia night and told me I was wrong. Even when I wasn't. It's been almost a year since Aaron and I split, and I think I can finally talk about it without that gut punch ache that used to come every time her name popped up on my phone. Funny thing is, even though we don't talk much anymore, she still crosses my mind more than I'd like to admit, not in the I want her back kind of way, but in that quiet nostalgia that hits when you hear a song or pass a place that reminds you of a version of yourself you used to be. A few months after we broke up, I ran into her mom, Leslie, at the grocery store. I didn't even recognize her at first. She saw me in the cereal aisle, smiled awkwardly, and said, Tom, right? I nodded, half expecting some cold shoulder or tight politeness. But she surprised me. She said Aaron had moved to Portland, that she was doing great, and that she'd mentioned me recently. I probably looked stunned because she laughed and said, Don't worry, it was nice. She said you taught her a lot about being with someone who actually communicates. Then she paused and added, She said you were the first person she ever felt really safe with. That hit me harder than I expected. I think I stood there holding a box of Cheerios, completely frozen, for a good 30 seconds after Leslie walked off. That night, I poured myself a drink and sat on the porch, thinking about everything that went down for so long. I'd been hung up on how things ended. The laughter at the table, the awkward silences, her dad's words. But hearing that from Leslie reminded me that not every ending has to be a failure. Sometimes, it's just a chapter that did its job. Around that same time, I started dating again. Nothing serious at first, a few coffee dates, a few dinners that ended with polite goodbyes. Then I met Anna. She's 34, works in marketing, divorced like me. We hit it off right away, mostly because neither of us is trying to impress anyone anymore. There's something freeing about that. Our first date was at a local jazz bar. We ended up talking for hours, and at one point, she mentioned she'd just started learning to play guitar. I told her I used to play back in college. Before work and marriage got in the way, she laughed and said, You should pick it up again. That weekend I did. Bought a used Fender off Facebook Marketplace, and started fumbling through old songs I hadn't touched in 20 years. It felt good. Grounding, even. I didn't tell her about Aaron right away, but eventually it came up. She asked about my past relationships, and I told her about the age gap and how it ended. I expected some kind of raised eyebrow, but she just nodded and said, Sounds like you both got something important out of it. It was such a simple, matter-of-fact response that I almost laughed. She wasn't judging, wasn't prying, just accepting it as part of my story. That's when I realized how different it feels to be with someone who doesn't make you defend who you used to be. About 3 weeks ago, Erin texted me out of nowhere. It was a picture of her standing in front of a bookstore in Portland with the caption, You'd love this place. No hey or context. Just that, I sat there staring at it for a while, trying to figure out what to say. In the end, I just replied, Looks like my kind of spot. Hope you're doing okay. She heart-reacted it. And that was it. No closure speech, no miss you message, just acknowledgement. Two people who shared something real, even if it couldn't last. Sometimes I think about how, in another timeline, maybe it could have worked. If we'd met later, or if I were younger, or she older. But I've stopped torturing myself with what-ifs. The truth is, we met at the exact time we were supposed to. She pulled me out of a rut I didn't even realize I was stuck in. And I think I helped her see what it means to be loved by someone steady, not just exciting. A couple weeks back, Anna came over for dinner. I was flipping burgers on the grill, and she asked if I'd ever thought about marriage again. I told her maybe, someday, but that I wasn't in a rush. She smiled and said, Good, neither am I. We sat out there until midnight, just talking. The air was cool, and the neighborhood was quiet except for crickets and the occasional car passing by. At one point, she leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "You seem like you've done a lot of growing." I didn't answer right away, but I knew she was right. Erin taught me to listen, to communicate, to care without controlling, and for all the awkward moments and judgmental stares, I don't regret a single second. That line, "I'm old enough to be your damn dad," used to echo in my head like an insult. Now, it just feels like a reminder of how far I've come. I used to flinch every time someone pointed out the age gap, like it was a flaw. Now, I just see it as one part of a story that helped shape me into someone better. If I ever see Erin again, I think I'll thank her. Not for the relationship, not even for the love, but for the way she made me confront myself. For the first time in a long time, I'm not trying to prove anything to anyone. I'm just living, and honestly, that feels like the real win. It's been almost 2 years now since Erin and I broke up, and I think this might be the last time I ever have much to say about it. Not because it doesn't matter anymore, but because it finally feels like it's settled into its place. A part of my story. Not the headline, "Life looks really different these days." Anna and I are still together, and it's steady in a way that's both comforting and kind of surprising. We've moved in together. Nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom condo outside of Denver with a view of the mountains if you squint past the power lines. She's the kind of person who fills up space without overwhelming it, and that's something I didn't know I needed. She's also met my parents, which went better than I expected. My mom loves her, of course, and my dad, who's usually reserved around anyone new, actually asked if she wanted to come fishing this summer. That's his way of saying she's in. There are moments when I catch myself comparing, not in a negative way, but in that quiet, reflective way you do when you realize how far you've come. Like how with Erin, everything was fire and spark and intensity. Every high felt incredible, but every low felt like falling off a cliff. With Anna, it's calm. It's like standing on solid ground after years of trying to keep my balance. That doesn't mean I don't think about Erin sometimes. Every now and then, I'll see something that reminds me of her. A little record store downtown, a certain kind of laugh from across the bar, a movie quote we used to toss back and forth. And for a split second, that old version of me flickers back. A few months ago, she actually reached out again. Out of nowhere, she texted me on a random Sunday. "Hey, not sure if you've heard, but my dad passed away." I hadn't. I told her I was sorry, that I remembered him, and I meant it. For all his gruffness, he loved her fiercely, she said. "It's been a weird time, makes you think about everything." We ended up talking for a bit after that. Not about the past, just about life. She told me she'd been in Portland ever since, still at the same job, still figuring things out but feeling more grounded. She mentioned she'd started seeing someone. Around my age this time, she joked. There was a moment, just a flicker of silence between messages, where I almost said I missed her. Not romantically, but in that deep, familiar way where you miss someone who once saw all your corners. But I didn't. Instead, I told her I was glad she was doing okay, and that her dad would have been proud. She just sent back a single heart emoji. That was the last time we talked. After that, I put my phone down, went outside, and watched the sunset from the porch. It was one of those evenings where the light turns everything gold, and I thought about how strange it is. How the people who once took up so much space in your heart eventually become a warm memory instead of a wound. Anna came out a few minutes later, barefoot, holding 2 beers. She sat next to me, leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "You're quiet tonight." I told her I'd heard from someone I used to care about, and she didn't press for details, just nodded, handed me the beer and said, "I'm glad you two could talk." That's the thing about her. She never gets threatened by ghosts. We sat there for a while, not saying much, just the sound of crickets and the faint hum of cars in the distance. I realized then that this and the quiet, the comfort, the ease, was what I'd always been looking for, even when I didn't know how to name it. Looking back, I don't think what I had with Erin was a mistake. It was exactly what I needed at the time. She came into my life when I was stuck in my own head, still angry about my divorce, still trying to prove I could feel something again. And she did that. She reminded me I was capable of connection, of joy, of risk, but love that burns that hot rarely lasts. It teaches you, though. It leaves its fingerprints on who you become after. If I ever ran into her again, I think we'd probably laugh. Maybe grab a coffee, catch up, talk about the weirdness of time and how it softens everything. And when we said goodbye, it wouldn't hurt. It would just be peaceful. These days, I wake up early, make coffee, watch the light hit the mountains, and think about how lucky I am to have finally found a kind of love that feels like quiet instead of chaos. I play guitar again, sometimes badly, and Anna hums along from the kitchen while she makes pancakes. And every so often, when I think about that night at her parents' table, her dad shaking his head saying, "I'm old enough to be your damn dad," I don't feel angry or embarrassed anymore. I just smile because he was right, and maybe that's okay. Maybe the whole point of that chapter was to grow into someone who could finally laugh about it. Not because it didn't matter, but because it mattered enough to change me. Stories number 10, I told my roommate I might move out, and everything exploded. When I first moved into this apartment, I thought it was going to be one of those new chapter moments. I'd just turned 27, had a stable job at a design firm, and wanted to live somewhere that didn't look like a college dorm. I found this 2-bedroom downtown through a coworker, and the rent was decent enough if I split it with someone. That's how I ended up living with Paige. At first, she was great. She was a teacher, paid on time, and seemed chill. She liked baking on weekends, watched trash TV with me, and even helped me paint my room when I moved in. We got along easily, like the kind of roommates who might actually become friends. But things started shifting about 6 months in. It wasn't dramatic at first, more like slow, annoying drips that turned into a leak. Paige started having her boyfriend, Nick, over constantly, and I mean constantly. He was there more nights than not, taking up the couch, the bathroom, the fridge. He wasn't a bad guy, just there, always there. They'd cook together and somehow managed to use every single pan and dish we owned. The sink would be full for days, and if I said something, Paige would apologize in that overly sweet tone people use when they're not actually sorry. "Oh my God, sorry, I totally forgot. I'll get it later." Then she wouldn't. The utilities started creeping up too, which made sense because Nick was practically living with us, using the heat and Wi-Fi like he paid for it, except he didn't. One night, I came home from work and found the place trashed. There were beer cans on the coffee table, takeout boxes everywhere, and the smell of burnt something hanging in the air. Paige and Nick were passed out on the couch under a blanket. It was a Tuesday. That was the first time I seriously thought about leaving. I'd been trying to keep the peace, but the idea of paying half the rent for a place that felt like their apartment instead of ours was starting to make me angry. The next morning, I texted Paige while I was at work. I didn't want to start a fight in person. I just said, "Hey, can we talk tonight? I'm getting pretty frustrated about the mess and how often Nick's here. I'm starting to think I might need to find another place if this keeps up." She replied almost instantly, "Wait, what? You're threatening to move out?" That word, threatening, really threw me. I wasn't trying to threaten her. I just wanted to be honest. When I got home, she was already pacing the kitchen, arms crossed, face red. "So you're gonna just bail because my boyfriend's here?" She snapped the second I walked in. I told her it wasn't about Nick specifically. It was about how he'd basically moved in without paying for it. I said I didn't mind guests. But this wasn't fair. She went off, said I was being uptight, that she shouldn't have to walk on eggshells in her own home, and that she and Nick were in a serious relationship. Then she threw in, "If you move out, I'll have to cover rent I can't afford. You'd be screwing me over." That last part really got to me. I didn't want to screw her over. But I also didn't sign up to live with 2 people. Things were tense after that. We barely talked. She'd give me these sharp little glares when I passed her in the hallway. Or she'd slam the cabinets extra loud when Nick was over. Which, of course, was always, then came the final straw. I had a deadline at work and decided to stay home to focus. Paige had told me she'd be gone all weekend visiting her sister, so I was counting on quiet. Instead, I woke up Saturday morning to loud music and Nick frying bacon shirtless in the kitchen. Paige had changed her mind about leaving and forgot to mention it. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just packed my laptop, went to a coffee shop and looked up listings. That night, I told her I'd made up my mind. I was going to move out at the end of the month. I'd cover rent through the notice period. And I'd even help her find a new roommate if she wanted. You'd think that would have been the end of it, but nope. Paige completely lost it. She started crying, saying I was abandoning her, that she couldn't afford the apartment without me, that I was overreacting and making her life harder on purpose. She even texted a mutual friend, claiming I was kicking her out, which wasn't remotely true. For a few days I felt guilty. Like maybe I was the bad guy for walking away instead of trying harder to compromise. But then, about a week before I moved out, I found out something that erased the guilt completely. A friend of hers posted on Instagram a story showing Paige and Nick signing something. The caption said, "Congrats on your new place." I was confused, so I asked. Turns out Paige and Nick had been planning to move in together already. She just hadn't told me. I confronted her about it, and she tried to downplay it, saying it wasn't official yet when I told her I was leaving. That's when I realized all her tears, all her talk about not affording rent. It was all manipulation. She didn't want to be left scrambling for a month before her new place was ready, so she tried to guilt me into staying. I moved out a week later. Earlier than planned, she didn't help pack. Didn't say goodbye, just glared at me as I carried boxes out the door. Now I live alone in a smaller apartment across town. It's quiet, it's clean, no dirty dishes, no surprise boyfriends, no emotional guilt trips. A few months later, I heard from our mutual friend that Paige and Nick broke up after only 3 months of living together. Apparently, she tried to get him to move out, and he refused because his name was on the lease. Poetic, really. Looking back, I think what stung the most wasn't the mess or the money. It was realizing how fast someone can flip on you when you stop doing what's convenient for them. Still, I don't regret how it went down. Sometimes you have to risk being the bad guy just to get your peace back. It's been about 8 months since I officially moved out, and honestly, living alone has been life-changing. I know that might sound dramatic, but when you've spent months feeling like you're walking on eggshells in your own apartment, finally having control over your space is liberating. I can cook whatever I want, leave the dishes in the sink without judgment, play music as loud as I want, and most importantly, not deal with constant guilt trips. Paige, of course, hasn't made it easy for herself. Word travels fast through mutual friends, and I've gotten bits and pieces about her post-move drama. Apparently, she tried to find a new roommate but was being extremely picky, partly because she kept comparing everyone to me. Then there's Nick. They were supposedly serious about moving in together, but he backed out because she was being too controlling. Classic. The weirdest part, though, is how much she tried to drag me back into it after the fact. She sent me a couple of texts months later, apologizing for the way she handled things, and implying that maybe we could talk again. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, though I won't lie, there's some residual frustration, but because I realized I didn't need to. I had my space, my peace, and my sanity, and she wasn't going to give that back. During those first few months alone, I learned a lot about myself. I realized I'd been tolerating a lot of passive-aggressive behavior without even noticing it. I'd convinced myself that her constant complaints, the way she tried to manipulate situations, and her emotional guilt trips were just quirks of living with someone else. But in reality, it was stress I didn't need to carry. I also started hanging out more with friends. I'd been so wrapped up in the apartment tension that I'd neglected social connections. Now, I have dinner dates, game nights, and even weekend trips that aren't interrupted by someone demanding attention or leaving a mess in their wake. I feel like a different person. More confident, more assertive, and frankly, happier. The apartment itself is now exactly what I wanted. I painted the walls a soft gray, got new furniture, and finally set up a proper workspace. I spend evenings cooking elaborate meals, reading, or just sitting on the balcony with my coffee. No one around to judge or demand anything. It's my space, and I feel grounded in it. I've also had some awkward encounters. Mutual friends sometimes ask about Paige, and I get the sense they want me to feel guilty. But I've realized that her drama is hers to manage. I don't need to shoulder it anymore. I can care without being consumed by it. A couple months ago, I ran into Paige briefly at a local coffee shop. She looked surprised to see me, said hi awkwardly, and then turned away to order. I felt zero tension or guilt. In the past, I might have apologized, explained myself, or tried to smooth things over. This time, I just smiled, nodded, and let it go. That moment cemented something for me. I had won my peace, and no one could take it from me. It's been a long process, but moving out wasn't just about escaping a roommate situation. It was about reclaiming my life and my space, and honestly, that's been worth every uncomfortable conversation. Every bit of guilt, and every second of hesitation. I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's been over a year now since I moved out, and honestly, the shift in my day-to-day life has been pretty surprising. I expected freedom, sure, but I didn't expect how much I'd start noticing small things I hadn't realized I was missing when I lived with Paige. Stuff like not tiptoeing around someone else's moods, being able to leave the apartment in a mess for a day without feeling guilty, or just sitting on the couch and binge-watching a show she hated without a lecture. A few months after I moved, I started hanging out more with friends I hadn't seen much during that time. One night a group of us went out for trivia, and I realized I could stay out as late as I wanted, talk loudly, and joke around without worrying about someone rolling their eyes or complaining when I got home at 2 a.m. It felt like reclaiming a part of myself I'd lost. I also started experimenting with cooking and hobbies that I'd pushed aside while living with Paige. I picked up painting again, set up a little corner in the apartment for a makeshift studio, and even signed up for a weekend pottery class. Just small things, but they made me feel like the apartment was truly mine for the first time. Of course, there were awkward moments with Paige after I moved. Mutual friends sometimes slipped into gossip. "Have you talked to Paige lately?" And I had to carefully navigate that without getting sucked back into her drama. Once, someone mentioned she'd been complaining that I abandoned her, and I had to explain to a friend that I didn't abandon anyone. I just took care of myself. It was exhausting at first, but over time, it became easier to shrug off. Then, a few months ago, I got an unexpected message from her. She said something like, "Hey, hope you're doing well. Just wanted to check in." I stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to reply with all the things I'd held back, the frustrations, the passive aggressiveness, the ways I felt manipulated, but I realized I didn't need to. I just sent a short, polite message back. "I'm doing well, hope you are too." That was it. No drama, no guilt, no reopening old wounds. Living alone also gave me a chance to reevaluate what I want in relationships. Being in a space where I could breathe without constant interruptions made me realize I value honesty, respect for boundaries, and mutual effort more than just compatibility or shared hobbies. I've started casually dating again, and while it's been awkward at times, rediscovering how to live with someone without letting them take over. It's been rewarding. I think the biggest change is how I feel about myself. I'm more confident, less anxious about other people's opinions, and I actually enjoy my space. The apartment isn't just where I live. It's a reflection of what I'm willing to stand up for. I realized that moving out wasn't just about escaping a bad roommate situation. It was about asserting that I deserved to feel comfortable and respected in my own home. Some days I even catch myself thinking, wow, I can't believe it's taken me this long to actually enjoy my own space. It's a small thing, but it's life-changing in ways I didn't expect. It's been almost 2 years since I moved out, and I can honestly say that life has stabilized in ways I didn't think were possible back when Paige and I were at each other's throats. The apartment is mine now in every sense. My furniture, my rules, my routines. And it's given me a sense of control and peace I never realized I'd been missing. Since then, I've kept in touch with only a few mutual friends. Mostly because they've seen both sides and respect the situation. None of them try to drag me back into Paige's drama anymore, which is a relief. I've learned to recognize when someone is trying to manipulate me emotionally. And more importantly, to step away before it affects my mental health. That was probably the biggest lesson from all this. Anna and I are still together, and our relationship has deepened in ways I wasn't expecting. We've settled into a routine that's both comfortable and exciting. Balancing independence with togetherness, we cook together, share hobbies, and sometimes just sit on the balcony with our coffee, watching the city lights. It's peaceful, and I've realized how much I'd been missing that sense of ease with someone else. I've even started looking into buying my own place. Not because I need to escape a roommate situation again, but because I want to build something permanent for myself. A space that's fully mine, without compromises or apologies. The idea of a home that reflects who I am, not just where I temporarily live, is exciting in a way I didn't anticipate. A few months ago, Paige texted me again. This time it was brief. "Hey, hope you're well. Just wanted to say thanks for being reasonable back then." I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because it didn't require a response. She'd gotten the closure she needed, and I had mine. Our chapter had ended cleanly, finally. I think the thing I appreciate most about all of this is the clarity it's given me. I understand now that boundaries are essential. Not just for roommates, but for any relationship. Moving out wasn't about being the bad guy or abandoning anyone. It was about preserving my well-being and setting the standard for how I want to be treated. Occasionally, I think about what it would have been like if I'd stayed. Constantly cleaning up after someone else, tolerating disrespect, feeling trapped in my own home. I shudder at the thought. Moving out was uncomfortable, Yes, but it was necessary. It gave me back my life, my space, and my sanity. And in the end, that's the most important thing. Sometimes standing your ground isn't just about conflict. It's about creating room for yourself to grow, to thrive, and to find peace. I wouldn't trade that lesson for anything. Stories number 11. I refused to co-sign my sister's mortgage after what happened with my ex-wife. So, this is a long one, and it's about family, money, and trust. Or rather, the lack of it. I 32M have a younger sister, Megan 28F, and we've always been close. Growing up, I felt like the protective older brother, the one who wanted to make sure she didn't make dumb mistakes. We fought sometimes, but we've always had each other's backs. Here's the background. A few years ago, I went through a messy divorce with my ex-wife Jessica. She and I bought a house together when we were young and naive, and at the time, I thought it would be a good investment. Turns out, I was wrong. She racked up credit card debt, made some impulsive purchases, and somehow convinced me it was fine because we're married. By the time the divorce happened, I was left with a huge mortgage, a bunch of unpaid bills, and a financial mess that took me over 2 years to untangle. I learned the hard way how devastating it is when someone you trust financially doesn't act responsibly. Fast forward to the present. Megan has been dating her boyfriend, Kyle 30M, for about 3 years. They just got engaged and want to buy their first house together. Megan called me last week and asked me if I would co-sign the mortgage with them to help them get a better rate. My first instinct was to say yes, after all. It's my sister. I want her to have a good life, and co-signing could help them secure the home of their dreams. But then I remembered the Jessica situation. I remembered the sleepless nights, the calls from creditors, the stress of trying to fix someone else's financial mistakes, and I realized co-signing is basically handing them a check to wreck my credit if anything goes wrong. So I said no. Megan didn't take it well. At first, she tried to convince me gently. It's not a big deal. Kyle and I are responsible. I just need the co-sign so the bank takes us seriously. I explained to her that my refusal wasn't a lack of faith in her or Kyle personally. It was about protecting myself after my past experience. But then the tone shifted. She got frustrated, defensive, even angry. You always have to make everything about yourself, she said. It's just a cosign. You're the only family I have who could help me with this. And you're being selfish? I was floored. Selfish? After everything I've done for her over the years. After bailing her out of car repairs, loans for college, even giving her money when she had emergencies. And I was selfish because I didn't want to risk my financial stability on a potential mistake? I tried to reason with her. Megan, you know I love you, and I want you to have this house. But co-signing is not just about helping you. It's about me being financially responsible. I can't risk losing my credit or being liable for a mortgage if something goes wrong. I learned the hard way with Jessica. I can't do it again. She crossed her arms and glared at me. You're punishing me for what happened with her? I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm protecting myself. That's the difference. She didn't budge. She left my apartment in tears, saying things like, I can't believe you won't do this for me. And I thought family had each other's backs. Since then, our conversations have been tense. She's been avoiding me a little, and even when we text, it feels forced. Kyle has been supportive of my decision, but I know Megan is still hurt. I don't feel guilty for saying no, but I do feel sad. I don't want this to damage our relationship permanently, but I also can't ignore my past experience and put myself in a position that could repeat that nightmare. I keep telling myself that love and support don't always mean putting yourself at risk. Helping her find alternative ways to secure the mortgage without me co-signing seems like the safest path. But I can't shake the feeling that Megan thinks I've let her down. So Reddit, am I really in the wrong for refusing to co-sign, given what I went through with my ex-wife? Or am I justified in protecting myself, even if it hurts my sister? Alright, here's the update. And honestly, it's been a roller coaster since I told Megan no. I didn't expect it to go this way. After our initial argument, things were tense. Megan stopped texting me as much, and when we did talk, it was mostly awkward small talk. I tried giving her space, thinking she just needed time to cool off, but a part of me worried that our relationship had taken a real hit. A week later, Megan called me in tears. She said that she and Kyle had been trying to apply for the mortgage without me, but their credit scores weren't high enough to get a decent rate. I could hear the stress in her voice. I don't know what to do. I just thought you'd help me, she said. I felt torn because I wanted to help her, but I also couldn't risk my own financial stability. I suggested alternatives. Why don't we look into different banks? Maybe a smaller lender would approve your loan without me co-signing. Or you could try to put more down, even if it means saving a few months longer. I'll help you research it. But I can't co-sign, she sniffled. Said she understood, but I could hear her disappointment. Then things got more complicated. Kyle, her fiancé, had a conversation with me one evening. He said he understood why I wouldn't co-sign, but he was frustrated. He said Megan was really upset and feeling abandoned, and that our refusal was causing tension in their relationship. He didn't pressure me to change my mind, but I could sense the guilt being subtly pushed onto me. I realized at that moment that my decision was going to have ripple effects beyond just Megan and me. It was affecting her engagement and potentially her marriage plans. I felt torn between doing what's right for me and wanting to protect her happiness. Over the next few weeks, I helped Megan and Kyle explore other options. I researched smaller banks, credit unions, and even first-time homebuyer programs. Slowly, they found a lender willing to work with them, though at a slightly higher interest rate. I celebrated with Megan when she got pre-approval. She smiled, hugged me, and whispered, "Thanks for helping, even if you didn't co-sign." It wasn't the smooth, perfect solution she had hoped for, but it worked. It took patience and compromise, but I felt like I had helped without putting myself at risk. However, Megan hasn't fully forgiven me yet. She still seems a little distant and avoids conversations about big financial stuff. I keep reminding myself that our relationship is bigger than this single disagreement. But it's hard not to feel a little guilty for the initial fallout. Taylor, my best friend, keeps telling me I did the right thing. "You can't fix everyone else's problems at the cost of your own stability," she says. And she's right. I've spent the last few years recovering from the fallout of my ex-wife's financial recklessness. I can't go back to that kind of stress. I think the biggest thing I've learned through all of this is that loving someone doesn't mean enabling them or putting yourself in danger. Supporting Megan meant helping her find solutions, not taking on her debt risk myself. So while our relationship has been strained, I'm holding on to the hope that Megan will understand in time. I can't change the past, but I can continue showing her support in ways that don't compromise my own future. And for now, that's enough. All right, here's the next part, and honestly, things have continued to get complicated. After Megan and Kyle got pre-approved through the alternative lender, I thought the tension would ease up. I mean, they finally had a path forward, and I was helping them research grants and first-time buyer programs. I even helped draft a budget plan for them to save for the down payment. I thought this might show Megan that I still cared and was supporting her, even without co-signing, but the fallout from my refusal kept showing up in unexpected ways. Megan started venting to mutual friends, and I started hearing echoes of her frustration. I found out that she'd been saying to them that I was holding her back and selfish for not co-signing. I won't lie, hearing that hurt. I get that she was frustrated, but the narrative she was spreading didn't include the part where I spent hours helping her navigate other options. It was all painted as me being the villain. Then things got awkward at a family gathering. My parents were hosting a small dinner, and Megan didn't even sit near me. She barely made eye contact and was visibly cold. She did speak to Kyle, though, so I know this wasn't about her being angry at him. I realized that refusing to co-sign hadn't just been a financial issue. It had caused a subtle shift in family dynamics. I tried to talk to Megan again. I said, "Look, I'm trying to help you in ways that don't put me in financial danger. This isn't about not loving you or not supporting you. I just can't co-sign without risking my future." She crossed her arms, sighed, and said, "It feels like you don't trust me. You think we'll mess it up," which honestly stung because, yes, I do remember exactly how bad things went with Jessica. But that's about her, not Megan. I tried explaining that to her. "This isn't about doubting you, Megan. It's about protecting myself after what happened with my ex-wife. I can't risk repeating that nightmare." She nodded but didn't say anything. It wasn't a fight, but it wasn't a resolution either, just silence. Then came another unexpected complication. Kyle lost his job temporarily due to restructuring at his company. Suddenly, their financial situation became even more fragile. Megan called me, panicked, and asked if I could help cover some of their monthly bills until Kyle got back on his feet. I had to say no again. I told her I would help brainstorm solutions. Maybe she could ask for temporary relief from the lender, or I could help her find part-time work. But I couldn't give money directly. I could hear the disappointment in her voice, and she said quietly, "I thought you'd be there for me." It hit me hard, because I am there for her, but not in the way she wants. She's seeing help as financial rescue. and I'm trying to help her be self-sufficient while keeping myself safe. It's a hard balance. In the weeks since then, I've been slowly learning how to set boundaries without burning bridges. I'm careful about what I offer, and I make sure I communicate clearly. I still spend hours helping her research mortgage options, grants, budgeting tips, and even local housing programs. But it's frustrating that my support isn't seen as valuable just because it's not the cosign. Taylor keeps reminding me, you can't fix someone else's life with your credit score. And she's right. But emotionally, it still hurts seeing my sister feel abandoned. I keep hoping that one day she'll understand that my refusal wasn't a rejection. It was a protection. For both of us in different ways. At least Kyle seems to get it. He's been calmer, more pragmatic, and appreciative of the help I can give. That's a relief because I don't want our relationship to be strained forever. So, right now, things are in this weird gray area. We're not fighting, but we're not close like we used to be. I'm helping where I can, setting clear boundaries, and hoping Megan will see that support isn't only measured in co-signed mortgages or checks. It's frustrating, emotional, and complicated. But I think it's also the first time I've ever tried to protect myself and someone I love at the same time. And I guess that's a start. Alright, here's the final update for this story, and honestly, it's been a journey to get to this point. Since my last update, things with Megan have slowly started to shift. Though not without bumps along the way. After months of tension, cold shoulders, and awkward family gatherings, something finally clicked. I think it started when Megan and Kyle actually closed on their house. It wasn't with my cosign, but they made it work. They had a slightly higher interest rate, had to stretch their budget, and work a bit longer to save for the down payment. But they did it. The day they got the keys, Megan called me. I braced myself for some awkward, resentful call, but instead she said, I just wanted to say, thank you for helping me figure things out without co-signing. I get it now. I almost dropped the phone. I said, You mean you understand why I said no? She laughed softly. Yeah. It wasn't easy to see it at first, but I get it now. You weren't trying to hurt me. You were trying to protect yourself. That one sentence felt like a weight lifted. We talked for a long time, about the mortgage, about the last year, and about how messy money and family can get. She admitted that she had been hurt and angry, but that in retrospect, she realized I had done what I thought was right. Kyle was in the background agreeing quietly, looking like a proud fiancé. Since then, our relationship has slowly been repairing itself. Megan still has moments of frustration when financial discussions come up, but she's no longer resentful. She's learning to respect boundaries, and I'm learning to separate my protective instincts from controlling behavior. Interestingly, this experience has also changed my approach to family in general. I've become more open about discussing finances, expectations, and boundaries up front. I've learned to be firm without feeling guilty and to offer support in ways that don't jeopardize my stability. For example, I helped Megan and Kyle set up a budget tracker, found grant programs they could apply for, and even offered advice on negotiating with the lender. None of it required me to risk my credit or co-sign, but it helped them feel supported. There was one last awkward moment when my parents brought up the co-sign at a family dinner. Megan spoke up before I could, saying, I get why he said no, and I'm grateful for the ways he did help me. Hearing her say that in front of everyone was a huge relief. It wasn't dramatic or emotional. It was just honest, and it felt like closure. Looking back, I don't regret my decision. If I had co-signed, I could have ended up in the same financial mess I was in after my divorce. But at the same time, I learned that refusing to help in one way doesn't mean refusing to help entirely. Support can come in many forms, and it doesn't always involve taking risks that aren't yours to take. Megan and I are closer now than we were at the height of the argument. Not perfect, but healthier. We've had honest conversations, rebuilt trust, and acknowledged each other's perspectives. I even joked with her recently that if she ever needs advice on credit scores or budgeting, she's got the best co-signer for guidance. Even if not literally, she laughed. So yes, it was a hard lesson in boundaries, family and financial responsibility, but ultimately, it taught both of us about respect, patience, and how to support each other without sacrificing ourselves. I still love my sister, and I'm proud of how we navigated this mess together. It wasn't easy, but it worked out, and that feels like a win on both sides.